Chapter 15 of Magic for Marigold. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by ShrimpPhish. Magic for Marigold by Lucy Maud Montgomery. One Clear Call. 1. I am afraid that if Marigold could have defined her state of mind when her mother told her she must go to the missionary meeting in the church that evening, she would have said she was bored with the prospect. For a little girl who had 3/4 cousins in the foreign mission field, it must be confessed that Marigold was shamefully indifferent to missionary work in general. She had planned to spend the evening with Sylvia, and she didn't want to exchange Sylvia's alluring company for a dull, stupid, poky old missionary meeting. The adjectives are Marigold's, not mine, and if you blame her for them, please remember that very few lasses of 11, outside of memoirs, have any very clear ideas of the heathen in their blindness. For Marigold, foreign missions were something that grown-ups and ministers naturally took to, but which were far removed from her sphere of thought and action. So she didn't see why she should be dragged out to hear a foreign missionary speak. She had heard one the night she went with Gwenny. A queer, sunburned, spectacled man, tremendously in earnest, but dreadfully dull. And Marigold considered she had had enough of it. But grandmother could not go out after night because of her rheumatism, and mother, for some strange reason, was set on going. It seemed that the speaker of the evening was a lady and an old schoolmate of hers. She wanted Marigold for company. Marigold would have done anything and gone anywhere for mother, even to a missionary meeting, so she trotted resignedly along the pleasant starlit road with mother, and thought mainly about the new dress of apricot georgette that mother, in spite of grandmother's pursed lips, had promised her for Willa Rogers' birthday party. Marigold got her first shock when the missionary rose to speak. Could that wonderful creature be a missionary? Marigold had never seen anyone so entrancingly beautiful in her life. What strange, deep, dark, appealing eyes! What cheek of creamy pallor despite India's suns! What a crown of burnished red-gold hair! What exquisite outreaching hands that seemed to draw you magnetically whither they would! What a haunting voice, full of pathos and unnameable charm! And what a lovely, lovely white dress with a pale, seraphic blue girdle hanging to the hem of it! Dr. Violet Merriweather had not been speaking for 10 minutes before Marigold was longing through all her soul to be a foreign missionary, with the uttermost ends of the earth for her inheritance. The only thing that surprised her was that there was no visible halo around Dr. Violet's head. Oh, what a thrilling address! Marigold had a moment of amazed wonder at herself for ever supposing foreign missionaries were poky before she was swept out on that flood tide of eloquence to a realm she had never known existed. A realm in which self-sacrifice and child widows and India's coral strand were all blended together into something indescribably fascinating and appealing. Nay, more than appealing, demanding. Before Dr. Violet was half through her address, Marigold Lesley, entranced in the old Lesley pew, was dedicating her life to foreign missions. It was a sudden conversion, but a very thorough one. Already Marigold felt that she was cut off forever from her old life, her old companions, her old dreams. She was not the silly, wicked little girl who had come unwillingly to the missionary meeting an hour ago, thinking of apricot dresses and fairy playmates on the hill. Not she. Consecrated. Set apart. All the rest of her life to follow that shining upward path of service Dr. Violet Merriweather pointed out. Some day, she too might be Dr. Marigold Lesley. Think of it! She had sometimes wondered whom she would like to resemble when she grew up. Mother? But mother was put upon. Everybody bossed her. But she had no longer any doubt. She wanted to be exactly like Dr. Violet Merriweather. She hated M. Church for giggling behind her. She looked with scornful contempt at Elder MacLeod's 4 grown-up daughters. Why weren't they in the foreign mission field? She almost died of shame when she sneezed rapidly 3 times in succession, just when Dr. Violet was making her most impassioned appeal to the young girls. Was there not one in this church tonight who would answer, "Here am I," to the one clear call? And Marigold, who longed to spring to her feet and say it, could only sneeze until the great moment was past, and Dr. Merriweather had sat down. Mr. Thompson followed with a few words. He lacked entirely the fascination of Dr. Merriweather, but one of his sentences struck burningly across Marigold's thrilled soul. A foreign missionary, he said, must be calm, serene, patient, tactful, self-reliant, resourceful, and deeply religious. Marigold remembered every one of his adjectives. It was something of a large order, but Marigold, in her uplift, had no doubt she could fill it eventually, and she would begin at once to prepare herself for her life work. At once. She went down the aisle as if she trod on air. Oh, how wicked and foolish she had been before this wonderful night, but now her face was, what had been Dr. Merriweather's phrase, set towards the heights, distant, shining heights of service and sacrifice. Marigold shivered in ecstasy. Tommy Blair was going down the opposite aisle. Marigold had hated Tommy Blair bitterly ever since the day he had written across the front page of her reader in his sprawling, inky hand, "This book is one thing, my fist is another. If you steal the one, you'll feel the other." But she must forgive him. A missionary must forgive everybody. She smiled at him so radiantly across the church that Tommy Blair went out and told his cronies that Marigold Lesley was gone on him. 2. Marigold could not tell her mother of her great resolve. It would make poor mother feel so badly. If father had been alive, it would be different. But she was all mother had. That was where part of the self-sacrifice lay. As for telling grandmother, Marigold never dreamed of it, but she plunged at once with all her might into the preparation for her life work. Grandmother and mother knew there was something in the wind, though they couldn't imagine what. I do not know if they considered Marigold calm, serene, patient, tactful, etc., but I do know they thought her very funny. "Whatever it is, I suppose it will run its course," said grandmother resignedly, out of her experience, but mother was secretly a little bit worried. Something must be the matter when Marigold said she would rather not have a new apricot dress. Her old one was quite good enough, and she didn't even want to go to Willa's party, only grandmother insisted because the Rogers would be offended. Marigold went under protest and condescended to the other little girls, pitying them for the dull, commonplace lives before them. Pitying Algy Rogers, too. Everyone knew his mother had vowed he should be a minister when he wanted furiously to be a carpenter. How different from her high, self-elected lot. "My, but ain't Marigold Lesley getting stuck up?" Willa Rogers said. Marigold laid aside the tiny diamond ring Aunt Marigold had given her on her last birthday. Consecrated people should not, she felt, wear diamond rings. Uncle Clon offered to get her one of the new striped silk parasols she had craved, but Marigold thanked him firmly and serenely, and would he please give her a concordance instead. Uncle Clon chuckled and gave it to her. He did not know what particular magic Marigold was making now, but he knew she was getting a tremendous lot of satisfaction out of it. She was. It was positive rapture to refuse the new ribbon hat streamers for which her soul had once longed, and wear her old hat to Cousin Nellie's wedding. Once Marigold had been interested in weddings. Who knew, when one grew up? But that was past. She must never, ever think of being married. Marigold was nothing if not thorough. Naught but counsels of perfection for her. She washed dishes and beat eggs and weeded her garden, wrapped as a saint. She gave up reading everything except missionary literature. She pored over the missionary books from the Sunday school library. especially one fascinating little fat brown volume, the biography of a missionary who had prepared herself from the age of 6. Marigold felt she had lost many precious years, but she would do her best to catch up. She rose at 5 o'clock, once, to read the Bible and pray. That would sound well in a memoir. The said missionary had arisen at 5 o'clock every morning of her life from her 6th birthday. But said missionary did not have a grandmother. That made all the difference. The only thing that really hurt very badly was giving up Sylvia. At first, Marigold felt that she could not do this, but she must. Sacrifice was not really sacrifice unless it hurt you. Dr. Violet had said so. She explained it all tearfully to Sylvia. Was it only fancy, or did a mocking elfin rill of laughter follow her down the orchard from the cloud of spruce? It almost seemed as if Sylvia didn't think she meant it. Marigold tried to fill up the resulting gap in her life by imagining herself being carried about on the backs of elephants and rescuing child widows from burning at the risk of her life. To be sure, Dr. Violet had not said anything about riding on elephants. She had even mentioned a prosaic motor car, and Mr. Thompson said widows were no longer burned, but no doubt something just as dreadful was done to them. Marigold stifled her longing for Sylvia and rescuing them by the dozen. Oh, I fancy Uncle Clon was right. Marigold had some moments of agonized wonder if she would ever be able to pray in public. She tried to make a small beginning by saying Amen under her breath whenever Mr. Thompson said anything in his prayers that appealed to her, and it was very hard to decide where she would go as a missionary. She shuddered for days between Japanese earthquakes and Indian snakes, until she got a book about the lepers in India. The lepers carried the day. They must be attended to. Snakes or no snakes, she would be a missionary to the lepers. And, meanwhile, Grandmother was horribly cross because Marigold had forgotten to water the geraniums. She couldn't explain to Grandmother that she had forgotten because she was bringing an Indian village through a famine, but she was calm and serene under Grandmother's disapproval. Very. 3. For 2 or 3 weeks this was all very well and satisfying. Then Marigold yearned for what Alexander the Great would have called more worlds to conquer, and Dr. Violet Merriweather might have termed a wider field of service. The heroine of the memoirs was always visiting someone who was sick or in trouble and working wonders of consolation. Marigold felt she should do the same, but whom to visit? There was nobody sick or in trouble, that Marigold knew of, near Cloud of Spruce just then, unless it might be Mrs. Delagarde. The thought of her came to Marigold like an inspiration. Mrs. Delagarde of the black robes and the sad, sad face, who never went anywhere but wandered about in her big garden all day long in South Harmony. Marigold had heard someone say that Mrs. Delagarde was a little off. She did not know what that meant exactly, but she felt sure anyone with that sorrowful face was in need of comforting. She would go to see her and... what? Read the Bible to her as the lady at the memoirs had done? Marigold could not see herself doing that, but she would just go to see her, and perhaps the way would be opened up. In the memoirs, a way was always opened up. Marigold slipped up to her room before she went and said the little special prayer, a very earnest, sincere little prayer, in spite of the fact that it was couched largely in the language of the memoirs. Then she stole away through the fragrant evening. Marigold had a moment of panic when she found herself really inside Mrs. Delagarde's gate, facing a grim house that looked black against the sunset. But a missionary must be self-reliant. A missionary must not give way to panic. With a gallant smile, Marigold marched down the aisle of daffodils to where Mrs. Delagarde was standing among the pale gold of lemon lilies in the shadows, with an amber sky and dark hills behind her, staring unseeingly before her with her large, strange, agate gray eyes. Mrs. Delagarde surprised Marigold. Her whole sad face lighted up with a wonderful radiance of joy. She stepped forward and held out her hands. Marigold was to be haunted for weeks by those long, pale hands held out in supplication. "Delight, Delight, you have come back to me," she said. Marigold let Mrs. Delagarde take her hands, put her arms around her, press her lips to her forehead. She suddenly felt very queer and frightened. There was something about Mrs. Delagarde, and she was being drawn into the house. What was Mrs. Delagarde saying in that quick, strange, passionate voice of hers that wasn't like any voice Marigold knew? "I've often seen you walking before me, with your face turned away. You'd never wait for me, but now you have come back, Delight, so you must have forgiven me. Have you forgiven me, Delight?" "Oh, yes, yes." Marigold would have said yes to any question. She did not know what she was saying. She was no brave missionary, no ambitious candidate for memoirs. She was only a very badly frightened little girl, shut up in a strange house with a very strange woman. Again that wonderful flash of joy crossed Mrs. Delagarde's face. "Come up to your room, Delight. It is all ready for you. I have kept it all ready. I knew you would come back to me sometime when I had been punished enough, so I have kept it ready for you." Marigold was being drawn up the stairs by that insistent arm, across the hall, into a room. A large, shadowy room with 4 great windows, and in the midst a huge white bed with something lying on it. Marigold felt a prickling in the roots of her hair. Was it? "There is your big doll, Delight," said Mrs. Delagarde, laughing a little wildly. "I've kept it for you, you see. Take it up and play with it. I want to see you play, Delight. It's so long since I have seen you play, and your dresses are all in the closet for you. See?" She opened the closet door, and Marigold saw them. Rows of dainty dresses hanging there, awfully like Bluebeard's wives in a picture book she had. Marigold found her voice, a shaky, panicky voice. "Please, may I go home now?" she gasped. I think Mother will be wanting me. It's getting late." A look of alarm crossed Mrs. Delagarde's pale face, followed by a look of cunning. "But you are home, Delight. You are my child, though you have left me so long. Oh, it was cruel to leave me so long, but I will not scold you. I will never scold you again. Now you have come back. You must never leave me again. Never. I'm going to find your father and tell him you have come back. I've never spoken to him since you went away, but I will speak now. Oh, Delight, Delight!" Marigold eluded the outstretched arms. Please let me go," she entreated desperately. "I'm not your little Delight. Really, I'm not. My name is Marigold Lesley. Please, dear Mrs. Delagarde, let me go home." "You are still angry with me," said Mrs. Delagarde sorrowfully. "That is why you talk so. Of course you are, Delight. Don't you think I know your golden hair? But you are angry with me because I whipped you that day before you went away. I will never do that again, Delight. You need not be afraid of me, darling. Tell me again that you forgive me, sweetest. Tell me again that you forgive me." "Oh, I do. If only Mrs. Delagarde will let her out. But Mrs. Delagarde knelt down by her entreatingly. "Oh, we will be so happy now that you have come back, Delight. Kiss me. You have turned your face away from me so long, my golden-haired Delight." Her voice was so appealing that Marigold, in spite of her terror, could not refuse. She bent forward and kissed Mrs. Delagarde, then found herself seized in a wild embrace and smothered with hungry kisses. Marigold tore herself from the encircling arms and darted towards the door, but Mrs. Delagarde caught her as she reached it, pushed her aside with a strange little laugh, and slipped out. Marigold heard the key turn in the lock. She was a prisoner in the house of a crazy woman. She knew now. That was what people meant when they called Mrs. Delagarde a little off. What could she do? Nothing. Nobody knew where she was, alone in this horrible, big, darkening room with the shrouded windows, with those dreadful dresses of dead delight hanging in the closet, with that terrible doll lying on the bed like a dead thing, with a huge black bearskin muff on the little stand by the bed. What wild tale had Lazare once told her about those big old-fashioned bearskin muffs? That they were really witches and went out on moonlit nights and danced in the snow. There was a moon tonight. Already its faint radiance was stealing into the room. Suppose the muff began to dance around the room before her? Marigold stifled the scream that rose to her lips. It might bring Mrs. Delegard back. Nothing would be so dreadful as that, not even a bewitched bearskin muff. She was afraid even to move, but she managed to tiptoe to window after window. They were all nailed down, every one of them. Anyway, all of them opened on steep, bare wall. No chance of escape there. And through one she saw the home light at Cloud of Spruce. Had they missed her? Were they searching for her? But they would never think of coming here. She sat down in an old cretonne-covered wing chair by the window, as far as possible from the bed and the muff. She sat there through the whole of the chilly, incredible, everlasting night. Nobody came. At first, there was only a dreadful stillness. There did not seem to be a sound in the whole earth. The wind rose, and the moonlight went out, and the windows rattled unceasingly, and she was sure the muff moved, and the dresses in the closet surely stirred. Twice she heard footsteps in the hall. Morning came. A cloudy morning with a blood-red sunrise sky. The windows all looked out on green, widespread fields. There was no way in which she could attract attention, no way of escape. She would die here of starvation, and Mother would never know what had become of her. Again and again she heard footsteps passing along the hall. Again and again she held her breath with fear lest they pause at the door. She suffered with thirst as the day wore on, but she felt no hunger. A queer, numb resignation was stealing over her. Perhaps she would die very soon, but that no longer seemed terrible. The only terrible thing was that Mrs. Delegard might come back. Evening again, moonlight again, wind again, a snarling, quarrelsome wind that worried a vine at the window and sent a queer shadow flying across the room to the bearskin muff. It seemed to move. It was moving. Marigold suddenly went to pieces. She shrieked madly. She flew across the room. She tugged frantically at the locked door. It opened so suddenly that she nearly fell over backward. She did not pause to reflect that it could never have been locked at all, in spite of the turned key. She was past thinking or reflecting. She fled across the hall, down the stairs, out into freedom. She never stopped running till she stumbled into the hall at Cloud of Spruce, a hall full of wild, excited people, amid which she caught one glimpse of Mother's white, anguished face before, for the first time in her life, she fainted. "Good God," said Uncle Clon. "Here she is." 4. It was next day, and Marigold was in bed with Mother sitting by her bedside, and Grandmother coming in and out, trying to look disapproving, but too relieved and thankful to make a success of it. The whole story had been told, and much more. Marigold knew all about Mrs. Delegard now. Poor Mrs. Delegard, who had lost her only little child a year ago, and had not been right in her mind ever since, who had sat for hours by her little girl's side entreating her to speak to her once more. Just one word. Who could not forget for a moment that she had whipped Delight the day before her sudden illness? Who had never forgiven her husband because he had been away when Delight took ill, and there was no one to go to the doctor through the storm? "The poor unhappy lady is greatly to be pitied," Mother said. "But, oh, darling, what a terrible time you've had." "Some of the rest of us have had a terrible time, too," said Grandmother grimly. "Mrs. Donkin was sure she saw you at dusk in an automobile with two strange-looking men, and Toff Leclerc's boat is missing, and we thought you had floated out into the channel in it. The whole country has been combed for you, miss." "I'm afraid I'm not fit to be a missionary, Mother," sobbed Marigold when Grandmother had gone out. "I wasn't brave, or resourceful, or serene, or anything." Mother cuddled her. compassionate, tender, understanding. It's a very fine, splendid thing to be a missionary, dear, and if, when you grow up, you feel called to that particular form of service, nobody will try to hinder you. But the best way to prepare for it is just to learn all you can and get a good education and live as happily and pleasantly as a small girl can meanwhile. Dr. Violet Merriweather was the jolliest little tomboy in the world when we were girls together, a perfect mischief and madcap. Aunt Marigold made her namesake stay in bed for a week. On the day Marigold was allowed to get up, Mother came in, smiling. "After all, your missionary effort seems to have done some good, Marigold. Mrs. Delegard's doctor says she is very much better. She has ceased to talk about Delight, and she has forgiven her husband. Dr. Ryan says she is quite rational in many ways, and he thinks if she is taken away for a complete change of scene and association, she will recover completely. He says she told him she was forgiven, and this conviction seems to have cured some sick spot in her soul." "Humph," said Grandmother, rather gently, however. "Isn't it funny she never came back to the room?" said Marigold. "She probably forgot all about you the minute you were out of her sight." "I was so afraid she would. I thought I heard her outside all the time. That was why I never dared go near the door. And it wasn't locked at all, though I know I heard the key turn." "I suppose it didn't turn all the way. Keys sometimes stick like that." "Wasn't it silly to think I was locked in when I might have got out right away? I guess I've been silly right through. But—" Marigold sighed. After having been consecrated and set apart for 3 weeks, it was somewhat flat and savorless to come back to ordinary memoirless life. But visions of a new apricot dress were again flickering alluringly before her eyes, and Sylvia was on the hill, a forgiving Sylvia who made no difference at all because of her brief defection. End of chapter 15.
Chapter 16 of Magic for Marigold. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Magic for Marigold by Lucy Maud Montgomery. One of Us. 1. I'm going traveling tomorrow. It makes me feel very important, Marigold told Sylvia one evening. Hitherto, Marigold had not done a great deal of visiting. Grandmother disapproved of it, and Mother seldom dared to disagree with Grandmother. Besides, Marigold herself had no great hankering to visit, by which she meant going away from home by herself to stay overnight. Only twice had she done it before, to Uncle Paul's and to Aunt Stasia's, and neither visit had been much of a success. Marigold still tingled with shame and resentment whenever she thought of it. She vowed she would never go to Aunt Stasia's again. But of course it was different from Aunt Anne's. Marigold loved Aunt Anne best of all her aunts. So when Aunt Anne came one day to Cloud of Spruce and said, "I want to borrow Marigold for a while," Marigold was very glad that Grandmother raised no objections. Grandmother thought it was time the child was seeing something of the world. She had her head stuffed too full of nonsense, like this Sylvia business. Despite Dr. Adam Clow, who came no more to Cloud of Spruce, having fared forth on an adventurous journey beyond our bourne of time and space, Grandmother thought it was hanging on too long. What might be tolerated at 8 was inexcusable at 11. Anne and Charles were sensible people, though Anne was too indulgent. Grandmother expected Marigold to come home with her digestion ruined for life. But Marigold went to Aunt Anne's with no cloud over her golden anticipations. Aunt Anne was a twinkly-eyed lady who was always saying, "I must go and see if there is anything nice in the pantry." You couldn't help adoring an auntie like that. It may be that grandmother's fears were not altogether unfounded, but she had to content herself with exacting a promise from Anne that Marigold must eat porridge every morning, real oatmeal porridge. If that were done, grandmother felt that the rest of the day might be trusted to take care of itself. So Marigold went to Broad Acres and loved it at first sight. An old gray homestead right down by the sea, the real wonderful sea, not merely the calm, landlocked harbor, built on a little point of land running out into a pond, with a steep fir-clad hill behind it, and slender silver birch trees all over it, with an old thorn hedge, the slips of which had been brought out from the old country, that mysterious land across the ocean where the Lesley clan had its roots, enclosing a garden even more wonderful and fascinating than the garden at home, for a garden by the sea has in it something no inland garden can ever have, an old stone dike between the house and the hill, with gorgeous hollyhocks flaunting over it, and a dear little six-sided room in the tower where you could lie at night and watch the stars twinkling through the fir boughs. All this with an uncle who knew a joke when he saw it, and an auntie who let you alone so beautifully, made Broad Acres just the spot for a vacation visit. And at first, Mats. Mats lived on the next farm and had been christened Martha, but she had lived that down. She was a fat, jolly little soul with round gray eyes, notorious freckles, luxuriant, unbobbed sugar-brown curls, a face meant for laughter, and a generous mother who made enchanting pies. For a week she and Marigold had no end of fun together, and got into no more mischief than two normal small girls should with no grandmothers around. And the soul of Marigold was knit into the soul of Mats, and all was harmony and joy, until Paula came and took immediate possession of the center of the stage, as is the way of the Paulas. 2. It happened at Sunday school. All the Leslies were Presbyterians, of course, but the Presbyterian church over the bay was 3 miles away, so Marigold was sent to Sunday school in the little white Baptist church on the other side of the pond, with the spruce trees crowding all around it. Marigold loved it. She thought it seemed like a nice, friendly little church. She wore her pretty new green dress with its little embroidered collar, and her smart little white hat with its green bow, and kid gloves, new kid gloves, real kid gloves. Mats, who knew no jealousy, was puffed up with pride over having for a chum a girl who wore real kid gloves. All the other little girls in Sunday school cast envious glances at her and Marigold. All but one. That one was sitting by herself on a bench reading her Bible. And when Marigold and Mats sat down beside her, that one got up and moved away, not contemptuously or proudly, but as some consecrated soul might remove itself automatically and unconsciously from the contamination of worldly contact. "Well, I never," said Mats. "Aren't we good enough to sit beside you, Paula Pengelly?" Paula turned and looked at them, or rather at Marigold. Mats she seemed entirely to ignore. Marigold looked back at her, spellbound from the start. She saw a girl, perhaps a year older than herself, slight as a reed, with large, glowing hazel eyes in a small, pale brown face. A braid of long, straight, silky, dark brown hair fell over each shoulder. Her cheekbones were high and her lips thin and red. She was hatless and shabbily dressed, and the Bible she clasped dramatically against her breast in her very long, very slender hands seemed to have been a Bible a great many years. She was not pretty, but there was something in her face. Interesting was hardly a strong enough word, and Marigold had not yet picked up fascinating. She could not help looking at this Paula. There was something in her eyes that made you suddenly feel she saw things invisible to others, things you wanted ardently to see too. a look that made Marigold think of a picture over Aunt Marigold's desk, the look of a white saint in ecstasy. "No," said Paula, in an intense, dramatic way that made Marigold shiver deliciously. "You are not. You are not Christians. You are children of wrath." "We ain't," cried Mats indignantly. But Marigold felt that they might be. Somehow one believed what Paula said, and she did not want to be a child of wrath. She wanted to be like Paula. She fairly ached with her desire for it. "We're just as good as you," continued Mats. "Goodness isn't enough, wretched child," answered Paula. "Hold your peace." "What does that mean?" whispered Mats as Paula turned away. Whispered it rather fearfully. Was she a wretched child? She had never thought so, but Paula Pengelly made you believe things. "She means hold your yap," said another girl passing. "Paula's got religion, didn't you know? Like her father." Whatever it was that Paula had, Marigold felt she wanted it too. All through Sunday school, she yearned for it, as she watched Paula's saintly little profile under that prim, straight hair. Grandmother and mother were Christians, of course, but they never made her feel as Paula had done. At one time, Marigold had believed Gwenny was very saintly, but Gwenny's supposed goodness only aggravated her. This was different. Marigold stayed for church that day because Mats was a Baptist and Paula sat opposite them in a side seat. All through the waiting time before service, Paula read her Bible. When the service began, she fixed her eyes unwinkingly on the top of one of the little oriel windows. Oh, thought Marigold passionately, to be saintly and wonderful like that! She felt religious and sorrowful herself. It was a beautiful feeling. She had never felt anything quite like it before, not even when listening to Dr. Violet Merriweather. Once Paula looked from the window and right at her, with those compelling, mystical eyes. They said, "Come," and Marigold felt that she must go, to the world's end and further. When church was out, Paula came straight up to Marigold. "Do you want to come with me on the way to the cross?" she asked solemnly and dramatically. Paula had the knack of making every scene in which she took part dramatic, which was probably a large part of her fascination. And she had a little way of saying things as if she could have said so much more and didn't. One yearned to discover the mystery of what she didn't say. "If you do, meet me under the lone pine tree at the head of the pond tomorrow." "Can Mats come too?" asked Marigold loyally. Paula flung Mats a condescending glance. "Do you want to go to heaven?" "Yes, but not for a long time yet," stammered Mats uncomfortably. "You see," Paula looked eloquently at Marigold, "she's not one of us. I knew you were the moment I saw you." "I am," cried Mats, who couldn't bear to be left out of anything. "And of course I want to go to heaven." "Then you must be a saint." Paula was inexorable. "Only saints go to heaven." "But do you have any fun?" wailed Mats. "Fun? We are saving our souls." "Would you," demanded Paula hollowly, "rather have fun or go to a place too dreadful to speak of?" No. Mats was quite subdued and willing, temporarily, to do and surrender everything. "Tomorrow, then, at 9 o'clock, under the lone pine," said Paula. The very tone of her voice as she uttered lone pine gave you a thrilling sense of mystery and consecration. Marigold and Mats went home, the former expectant and excited, the latter very dubious. "Paula's always got some bee in her bonnet," she grumbled. "Last summer she read a book called Rob Roy, and she made all us girls call ourselves a clan and have a chieftain and wear thistles and tartans. Of course she was chieftain. But there was some fun in that. I don't believe this religious game will be as good." "But it's not a game," Marigold was shocked. "Maybe not, but you don't know Paula Pengelly." Marigold felt she did. Better than Mats, better than anybody. She longed for Monday and the Lone Pine. "Old Pengelly's her father," said Mats. "He used to be a minister long ago, but he did something dreadful and they put him out. I think he used to get drunk. He's—" Mats tapped her forehead with a significant gesture, as she had seen her elders do. "He preaches a lot yet, though in barns and places like that. I'm scared to death of him, but lots of people say he's a real good man and very badly used. They live in that little house on the other side of the pond. Paula's aunt keeps house for them. Her mother is long since dead. Some people say she has Indian blood in her. She's never decently dressed, all cobbled together with safety pins, Ma says. Are you really going to the head of the pond tomorrow?" "Of course." "Well," Matt sighed, "I suppose I'll have to go too, but I guess our good times are over." 3. Monday and the Lone Pine came, though Marigold thought they never would. She told Aunt Anne and Uncle Charlie at the breakfast table where she was going, and Uncle Charlie looked questioningly at Aunt Anne. As Marigold went out, he asked, "What is that young devil in petticoats up to now?" Marigold thought he was referring to her and wondered what on earth she had done to be called a young devil. Her conduct had really been very blameless, but she forgot all such minor problems when they reached the Lone Pine. Paula was awaiting them there, still rapt, still ecstatic. She had not, so she informed them, slept a wink all night. "I couldn't, thinking of all the people in the world who are going to be lost." Marigold immediately felt it was dreadful of her to have slept so soundly. She and Mats sat down, as commanded, on the grass. Paula gave a harangue, mainly compounded of scraps of her father's theology. But Marigold did not know that, and she thought Paula more wonderful than ever. Mats merely felt uncomfortable. Paula hadn't even told them to sit in the shade. All very fine if you had the Lesley pink and white or the Pengelly brown. But when you hadn't, right here in the boiling sun, it must be admitted, I am afraid that Mats just then was much more concerned with her freckles than with her soul. "And now," concluded Paula with tragic earnestness, "both of you ask yourselves this question. Am I a child of God or of the devil?" Mats thought it was horrid to be confronted with such a problem. "Of course I'm not a child of the devil," she said indignantly. But Marigold was all at sea. Under the spell of Paula's eloquence, she did not know what her ancestry ought to be. "What'll we do about it if we are?" she asked unsteadily. "Repent! Repent of your sins!" "Oh, I haven't any sins to repent of," said Mats, relieved. "You can never go to heaven if you haven't committed sins, because you can't repent of them and be forgiven," said Paula inexorably. This new kind of theology dumbfounded Mats. While she was wrestling with it, Paula's mesmeric eyes were on Marigold. "What would you call sins?" Marigold asked timidly. "Have you ever read stories that weren't true?" demanded Paula. "Yes, and—" Marigold was seized with the torturing delight of confession. "And made them up, too." "Do you mean to say you've lied?" "Oh, no, not lies. Not lies. I mean, they must be lies if they weren't true." "Well, perhaps. And I've thought of things when Uncle Charlie was having family prayers." "What things?" said Paula relentlessly. I thought of a door in a picture on the wall. I thought of opening it and going in, seeing what was inside, what people lived there." Paula waved her hand. After all, what did it matter if Marigold did think of queer things while Charlie Marshall was praying? What did his prayers matter? Paula was after the things that mattered. "Have you ever eaten meat?" "Why, yes. Is that—" "It's wicked, very wicked. To sacrifice life to your appetites. Oh, shame!" Marigold writhed with it. It was intolerable to have Paula looking at her in such scorn. Paula saw the shame and promptly assuaged it. "Never mind, you didn't know. I've et meat too, till last spring. I had an awful rash. I knew it was a judgment because I'd done something wrong. I knew it was eating meat. Father said so. He said the finger of God had touched me, so I vowed I'd never eat any more. Oh, how my conscience vexed me. It was awful how I suffered." There was real anguish in Paula's voice. She stood, a flaming, fascinating figure, under the old pine, a young priestess, inspired, devoted. Marigold felt she would follow her to the stake. "What are we going to do about it?" said that detestable practical Mats. "We are going to form a society for saving our souls and the world," said Paula. "I've thought it all out. We'll call ourselves the Lighted Lamps. Don't you think that's a splendid name? I'll be head of it, and you must do just as I tell you. We will live such beautiful lives that everybody will admire us and want to join us. We will be just as good every day as we are on Sunday." Here Mats emitted a marvelous grisly groan. "But we will be very exclusive. No one can come in who is not ready to be a martyr." "Ah, but what are we to do?" said Mats with a sigh. She must go where Marigold went, but her chubby personality had no heritage of martyrdom. Paula allowed herself to sit down. "First, we must never eat anything more than is absolutely necessary. No meat, no pudding, no cake." "Oh, I have to eat some," cried Marigold sorrowfully. "Auntie would think I was sick or something and send me home." "Well, then, there must be no second helpings," said Paula inexorably. They pledged themselves, Marigold thinking guiltily of the delicious little strawberry shortcakes Aunt Anne had said she was going to make for dinner. "We must never read or tell anything that isn't strictly true. Never pretend anything." Marigold gave a gasp, but recovered herself gallantly. "Never wear any jewelry and never play silly games." "Can't we play at all?" implored Mats. "Play? In a world where we must prepare for eternity? You can play if you like, but I shall not." "What will we do if we can't play?" asked Marigold humbly. "Work. The world is full of work waiting to be done. I always help Aunt Anne every way I can. But when I get through, what can I do?" "Meditate. But we'll find lots to do when we get going. Now, Mats, if you're coming in on this, come with all your soul. You must sacrifice. You have to be miserable or you can't be good. You mustn't forget for one moment that you're a sinner. You can't be both religious and happy in this world of sin and woe. We must live up to our name. And every time our light goes out, we must do penance." "How?" Mats again. "Oh, lots of ways. I put some burrs next to my skin yesterday because I only wanted a second helping at dinner. And kneel on peas. And fast. I fast often. And do you know, girls, when I fast, I hear voices calling me by name." Paula's face took on a strange, unearthly radiance that completed Marigold's subjugation. "And I know it is angels calling me to my life's work, singling me out, setting me apart." Mats had a hazy idea that it was going to be pretty hard to live up to Paula, but she meant to get to the bottom of things. "You've told us what we mustn't do. Now tell us what we must do." "We must visit sick people." "I hate sick people," muttered Mats rebelliously, while Marigold thought with a shudder of her experience with Mrs. Delegard. Paula, she felt, would not have been a bit frightened of Mrs. Delegard. "And read the Bible every day and say our prayers night and morning." "I don't see any use in saying prayers in the morning. I ain't scared in daytime," protested Mats. Paula tried to ignore her and addressed herself to Marigold, who, as she felt instinctively, was a devotee of promise. You could never make anything of Mats, always chattering like a silly little parrot, But this new girl was after her own heart. "We must hand out tracts. Father has stacks of them, and ask people if they're Christians. You can ask your father's hired man, Mats." "He'd leave if I did, and Father'd kill me," said Mats uncomfortably. "Well, we're organized," said Paula. "Repeat after me. Lighted lamps we are, and lighted lamps we will be, as long as grass grows and water runs." "Ow!" whimpered Mats, but she repeated the vow glibly, comforted by recollections of other vows with the same implication of eternity, which had proved to be of time when Paula grew tired of them. "And now," concluded Paula, "I'll lead in prayer," which she did so beautifully and fervently, with her pale hands clasped and her eyes fixed on the sky, that Marigold's soul was uplifted, and even Mats was impressed. There may be some fun in this, after all, she reflected, but I wish Paula would repent in winter. That's the best time for repenting. 4. As the days went on, Mats grimly concluded that there wasn't much fun in it. She was with them, but not of them. As she had foreseen, it was very hard to live up to Paula. At least, for her, Marigold didn't seem to find it hard. Marigold, who went about with stars in her eyes, so unnaturally good that Aunt Anne was worried. Good on the outside, at least. Marigold knew she was full of sin inside because Paula told her so. Marigold was by now wholly in the power of this pale brown girl, and thought her the most wonderful saintly creature that ever lived. She grieved constantly because she fell so far short of her. Paula fasted so much, as that wan, rapt face and those purple-ringed eyes testified eloquently. Marigold couldn't fast because of unsympathetic relatives. She could only refuse second helpings and pieces, and writhe in bitterness when she heard Paula say loftily, "I haven't touched a morsel of food since yesterday morning." Neither could she hand out little time-yellowed tracts at church as Paula did every Sunday, and as Mats flatly refused to do at all. "You can amuse yourself by being miserable if you want to," said Uncle Charlie, "but I'm not going to have you making a nuisance of yourself as Paula Pengelly does." Paula a nuisance? That self-sacrificing little saint who was positively happy in wearing a shabby, faded dress to church, and who knew whole chapters of the Bible by heart. Not the interesting ones either, but the dull ones like those in Numbers and Leviticus. Who wouldn't play games, not even jackstones, though she was crazy about them, because it was wrong? Who cried all night about her sins, when she, Marigold, could only squeeze out a few tears and then fall ignominiously asleep? Who never laughed? There was no place in religion for laughter, not even with an Uncle Charlie forever saying things that nearly made you die. Who never did anything she liked to do because if you liked a thing, it was a sure sign it was wrong. Marigold was furious with Uncle Charlie. "It's lovely here at Aunt Anne's," she sighed, "but it's so hard to be religious. I suppose it's easier at Paula's. Her father doesn't hinder her." Marigold knew Paula's father by this time. She had been to have tea with Paula and stay all night with her, a great privilege which Aunt Anne did not properly appreciate. Paula lived in a little gray house on the other side of the pond, a tired little house that looked as if it were on the point of lying down. Inside, the blinds were very crooked and the furniture very dusty. There was nothing for supper but nuts, apples, brown bread, and some stale sweet crackers. But that did not matter for Marigold, who could not have eaten anyhow. She was in such awe of Mr. Pengelly, a tall old man with long gray hair, a wonderful gray beard, a great hawk nose, and eyes that shone in his lined face like a cat's in the dark. He never spoke a word to her or anyone. Paula told her it was because he had one of his vows of silence on. "Sometimes he never says a word for a whole week," said Paula proudly. "He is such a good man. Once Aunt Em made a pudding for dinner Christmas, a little pudding, and Father grabbed it from the pot and hurled it out the doors. But even he isn't as good as great Uncle Josiah was. He let his nails grow till they were as long as birds' claws, just to please God." Marigold couldn't help wondering what particular pleasure Uncle Josiah's nails would give God, but she crushed back the thought rigidly as a sin. They slept in a stuffy little hall bedroom that had shabby, faded pink curtains and a broken pane, and was lighted by a lamp that seemed never to have been cleaned. The head of the funny little old wooden bedstead was just against the rattling window. "The snow drifts in on my pillow in winter," said Paula, the fires of martyrdom burning in her eyes as she knelt on peas to say her prayers. The rain beat against the panes. Marigold half wished she were back in the tower room at Broad Acres. This was not one of the nights Paula lay awake to worry over her sins. She slept like a log. She snored. Marigold did the lying awake. Breakfast. No salt in the porridge. Paula had burned the toast. The tablecloth was dirty, and Marigold had a chipped cup. Then she drank avidly. This was certainly a good chance to do something for penance. Penance for certain thoughts she had been thinking, but not about Paula. Paula, in spite of the snores, still shone amid all her shabby surroundings like a star far above the soil and mist of the earth, a star for worship and reverence. Marigold worshipped and reverenced. She was strangely happy in all her renunciations and denials. She would give up anything rather than face Paula's scornful smile. It was all the reward she wanted when Paula said graciously, as a priestess might stoop to approve the acolyte, "I knew as soon as I saw you that you were one of us." Aunt Anne and Uncle Charlie couldn't understand it. "That Pengelly imp seems to have a power to bewitch the other girls," grumbled Uncle Charlie. "Marigold is absolutely infatuated with her and her kiddidos. But there's one thing, if this keeps on after she goes home, old Madame Lesley will make short work of it." 5. Marigold spent a considerable part of her time doing penance in various small ways for various small misdemeanors. It was not always easy to find a penance to do, something Aunt Anne would let you do. No fasting or kneeling on peas for Aunt Anne. And even when Marigold and Paula between them, Mats bluntly declined to have anything to do with penances, hit on a workable penance, Marigold was apt to discover that she rather liked it. It was interesting, and Paula had said, "Just as soon as you like doing a thing, it isn't penance, of course." But one penance was an experience that always stood out clearly in Marigold's memory. At its first conception, it looked like a real penance. She had fallen from grace terribly. She and Mats, if Mats could ever have been considered in a state of grace by Paula's standards. She had been invited to supper at Mats's, and she couldn't resist that supper. Mats's mother was a notable cook, and she had 4 different kinds of cake. And alas, every one was a kind of which Marigold was particularly fond. Banana cake with whipped cream, strawberry shortcake, date layer cake, jelly roll cake. Marigold took a piece of each and 2 pieces of the shortcake. She knew she was doing wrong from Mother's point of view as well as Paula's, but with Mats gobbling industriously by her side and Mats's mother saying reproachfully, "You haven't eaten anything, child," what was one to do? And after supper, she and Mats had got a big fashion book and picked out the dresses they'd have when they grew up, and filled their cup of iniquity to overflowing by boxing the bed of the hired man in the kitchen loft. At that, he probably slept better than Marigold, who was sick all night and had horrible dreams, which might have been thought a sufficient penance, but Paula had a different opinion. Marigold's conscience gave her no rest until she had confessed everything to Paula. "You are a Pharisee," said Paula sorrowfully. "Oh, I'm not," wailed Marigold. "It was just—" Then she stopped. No, she was not going to say, "Mats and her mother just made me eat." That wasn't altogether true. She had been very willing to eat, and she must bear her own iniquities. But had she lost caste forever in Paula's eyes? Would she no longer be considered one of us? "You've been very wicked," said Paula. "Your lamp has almost gone out, and you must do especially hard penance to atone." Marigold sighed with relief. So she was not to be cast off. Of course she would do a penance. But what penance? At once severe enough and practicable. Paula thought of it. You're afraid of being alone in the dark. Sleep out all night on the roof of the veranda. That will be a real penance. It certainly would. How real, Marigold knew too well. It was true that she was afraid of being alone in the dark. She was never afraid in the dark if any one was with her, but to be alone in it was terrible. She was becoming very ashamed of this terror. Grandmother said severely that a girl of 11 should not be such a baby, and Marigold was sure that old grandmother would have scorned her for a coward. But so far she had not been able to conquer her dread of it, and the thought of spending the night alone on the veranda roofs appalled her. Nevertheless, she agreed to do it. It was easy enough from one point of view. There was a door in her little tower room opening on the veranda roof, and there was a little iron bedstead on it. All Marigold had to do was to slip out of bed as soon as everybody was asleep and drag her bedclothes and mattress out. She did it, in a cold perspiration, and crept into bed trembling from head to foot. "I won't be scared of you," she gasped gallantly to the night. But she was. She felt all the primitive, unreasoning fear known to the childhood of the race. The awe of the dark and the shadowy, the shrinking from some unseen menace lurking in the gloom. The night seemed creeping down through the spruce wood behind the house like a living, but not human, thing to pounce on her. Darkness all about her, around, above, below, and in that darkness, what? She wanted to cover up her head, but she would not. That would be shirking part of the penance. She lay there and looked up at the sky, that terrible ocean of stars that Uncle Clon had told her were suns, millions of millions of millions of miles away. There did not seem to be a sound in the whole earth. It was waiting. Waiting for what? Suppose everyone in the world was dead. Suppose she was the only person left alive in that terrible silence. Then, she could not have told whether it was hours or minutes later, something changed. All at once. She was no longer frightened. She sat up and looked about her, on a world of velvet and shadow and stars. The boughs of the spruces tossed in a sudden wind against the sky. The gulf waters were silver under the rising moon. The trees were whispering in the garden like old friends. The fern scents of a warm summer night drifted down from the hill. "Why, I like the dark," Marigold whispered to herself. "It's nice and kind and friendly. I never thought it could be so beautiful." She stretched out her arms to it. It seemed a presence, hovering, loving, enfolding. She lay down again in its shadow and surrendered herself utterly to its charm, letting her thoughts run out into it far beyond the Milky Way. She did not want to sleep, but after a time she slept, and wakened in the pale, windless morning just as a new dawn came creeping across broad acres. The dreamy dunes along the shore were lilac and blue and gold. Above her were high and lovely clouds just touched by sunrise. Below, in the garden, the dews were silver in the hearts of unblown roses. Uncle Charlie's sheep in the brook pasture looked amazingly white and pearly and plump in the misty morning light. The world had a look Marigold had never seen it wear before, an expectant, untouched look, as if it were a morning in Eden. She sighed with delight. A mystic happiness possessed her. Paula was over soon after breakfast to find out if Marigold really had stuck it out on the veranda all night. "You look too happy about it," she said reproachfully. "It was a penance for a little while at first, and then I enjoyed it," said Marigold honestly. "You enjoy too many things," said Paula despairingly. "A penance isn't a penance if you enjoy it." "I can't help liking things, and I'm glad I do," said Marigold in a sudden accession of common sense. "It makes life so much more interesting." 6. Marigold was going to the post office to mail a letter for Aunt Anne. It was a lovely afternoon. Never had the world seemed so beautiful, in spite of the hundreds of millions of sinful people living in it. When she passed Mats's gate, Mats was playing by herself at jackstones under the big apple tree. Mats had backslidden sadly of late, and had returned to her wallowing in jackstones, thereby proving conclusively that she was not one of us. She beckoned a gay invitation to Marigold, but Marigold shook her head and walked righteously on. A little further down, there was a sharp turn in the red road, and Miss Lula Jacobs' little white house was in the angle. And Miss Lula's famous delphiniums were holding up their gleaming blue torches by the white paling. Marigold stopped for a moment to admire them. She would have gone in, for she and Miss Lula were very good friends, but she knew Miss Lula was not home, being in fact at Broad Acres with Aunt Anne at that very moment. Marigold could see the pantry window through the delphinium stalks, and she saw something else. A dark brown head popped out of the window, looked around, then disappeared. The next moment, Paula Pengelly slipped nimbly over the sill to the ground and marched off through the spruce bush behind Miss Lula's house. And Paula held in her hands a cake, a whole cake, which she was devouring in rapid mouthfuls. Marigold stood as if turned to stone in that terrible moment of disillusion. That was the cake Miss Lula had made for the Ladies' Aid Social on the morrow, a very special cake with nut and raisin filling and caramel icing. She had heard Miss Lula telling Aunt Anne all about it just before she came away. And Paula had stolen it. Paula, the lighted lamp. Paula, the consecrated. Paula, the rigid devotee of fasts and self-immolation. Paula, the hearer of unearthly voices. Paula had stolen it and was gobbling it up all by herself. Marigold went on to the post office, torn between the anguish of disillusionment and the anger of the disillusioned. Nothing was quite the same. Never could be again, she thought gloomily. The sun was not so bright, the sky so blue, the flowers so flowery, the west wind purring in the grass and the mad merry dance of the aspen leaves hurt her. An ideal had been shattered. She had believed so in Paula. She had believed in her vigils and her denials. Marigold thought bitterly of all those untaken second helpings. Mats was not in when Marigold returned, but Marigold went home to Broad Acres and played jackstones by herself, and let herself go in a mad orgy of pretending, after all these weeks when, swallowed up in a passion of sacrifice, she had not even allowed herself to think of her world of fancy. Also, she remembered with considerable satisfaction that Aunt Anne was making an apple cake for supper. Paula found her there and looked at her reproachfully, with purple-ringed eyes, which, Marigold reflected scornfully, certainly did not come from fasting this time. Indigestion, more likely. "Is this how you, the possessor of an immortal soul, are wasting your precious time?" she asked rebukingly. "Never mind my soul," cried Marigold stormily. "Just you think of poor Miss Lula's cake." Paula bounced up, her pale face for once crimson. "What do you mean?" she cried. "I saw you," said Marigold. "Do you want your nose pulled?" shrieked Paula. "Try it," said Marigold superbly. Suddenly, Paula collapsed on the gray stone and burst into tears. "You needn't make such a fuss over a trifle," she sobbed. "Trifle? You stole it. I was so hungry for a piece of cake. I never get any. Father won't let Aunt Em make any. Nothing but porridge and nuts for breakfast and dinner and supper, day in and day out. And that cake looks so scrumptious. You'd have taken it yourself. Miss Lula has heaps of them. She loves making cake." Marigold looked at Paula, all the anger and contempt gone out of her eyes. Little sinning, human Paula. Like herself, Marigold no longer worshipped her, but she suddenly loved her. "Never mind," she said softly. "I guess I understand." But I can't be a lighted lamp any longer, Paula. Paula wiped away her tears briskly. Don't know's I care. I was getting awfully tired of being so religious anyhow. I think we didn't go the right way about being religious, said Marigold timidly. Aunt Marigold says religion is just loving God and people and things. Maybe, said Paula, going down on her knees, but not to pray. Anyhow, I got all the cake I wanted for once. Let's have a game of jacks before Matt shows up. She always spoils everything with her jabber. She isn't really one of us. End of Chapter 16. Read by Kristin Barkhurst.
Chapter 17 of Magic for Marigold. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Leah Lallo. Magic for Marigold by Lucy Maud Montgomery. Not by Bread Alone. Salome had gone to Charlottetown for the day, rather unwillingly, for she had had a horrible dream of 14 people coming to supper, and nothing in the house for them to eat but cold-boiled potatoes. "And there's more truth than poetry in that, ma'am," she said, "for there isn't a thing baked except the raisin bread. I assure you I don't dream dreams like that for nothing. And there's the Witch of Endor polishing her face up by the apple barn." It was an inflexible cloud of spruce tradition that there must always be cake in the pantry. Fresh, flawless cake. Lest unexpected company come to tea. No company had ever found Cloud of Spruce cakeless. Grandmother and mother would have both died of horror on the spot if such a thing had happened. Kingdoms of Europe might rise and fall, famines might ravage in India, and revolution sweep China, liberals and conservatives, Republicans and Democrats might crash down to defeat, but so long as cake box and cookie jar were filled, there was balm in Gilead. Yet this unthinkable thing had actually occurred. The evening before, 3 cartloads of visitors had come out from Summerside and found cake in the pantry, but left none. No wonder Salome was upset. "I have made cake before now," said Grandmother rather sarcastically. Every once in so long Salome had to be snubbed. "And so has Mrs. Leander." When Grandmother called Lorraine Mrs. Leander before Salome knew she was snubbed. "I am well aware," she said with meek stateliness, "that I am not the only cook at Cloud of Spruce. I merely thought, ma'am, that seeing it was my duty to keep the pantry well filled, I ought not neglect it for the sake of my own pleasure. I am not like my sister-in-law, Rose John. Ma'am, she hasn't any sense of shame. When unexpected company comes to tea, she just runs out and borrows a cake from a neighbor. Whatever John saw in her enough to marry her, I have never been able to imagine." "Go and enjoy your holiday, Salome," said Lorraine kindly, knowing that if Salome once fairly embarked on the delinquencies of Rose John, there was no telling when she would stop. "You deserve it. Grandmother and I will soon fill up the pantry." Alas! Mother had got only as far as getting out her mixing bowl when Uncle Jack's Jim arrived. Bloody with spurring, fiery with haste, or the modern equivalent for it. Great Uncle William Lesley was dying at the head of bay, or thought he was, and he wanted to see Grandmother and the Leander's wife. They must lose no time if they were to get there before he died. It was a tragedy. "I have never," said Grandmother in a tone of anguish as she tied on her bonnet, "gone away from home and left absolutely no cake in the house." "Surely no one will come today," moaned Mother, equally wretched. Really, it was a most inconvenient time for Great Uncle to die. "Don't forget to feed the cats," Grandmother told Marigold. "And mind you don't go wandering in Mr. Donkin's hill pasture. He turned his oxen there." "That's not his ox," said Marigold. "That's his old red bull." Grandmother would have died before she would have heard the word bull aloud. She drove away with Uncle Jack's Jim, sadly wondering what the young people of this generation were coming to. Apart from that, she did not worry over leaving Marigold alone. Marigold was 11 now, and tall for her age. One year she had been measured by a rose bush, and the next by the bluebells. This year she was as tall as the phlox. She liked being alone very well once in a while. It was quite important being in charge of Cloud of Spruce. She swept the kitchen and got dinner for herself and Lazare. She fed the cats and washed the dishes and wrote a letter to Paula. Then the end of the world came. A car stopped at the gate. 7 people descended therefrom and marched in past the platoons of hollyhocks with the air of people coming to stay. Marigold, staring aghast through the window, recognized them. She had met them all 2 weeks ago at a clan funeral, where grandmother had proffered them all a warm invitation to Cloud of Spruce. Second cousin Marcus Carter, his wife and son and daughter from Los Angeles. Second cousin Olivia Peake from Vancouver, and third cousin Dr. Palmer of Knox College, Toronto, with his wife. And there was no cake at Cloud of Spruce. Marigold accepted the situation. In that moment, she decided what she would do. As graciously as Mother herself could have done, she welcomed the guests at the door. "Aunt Marianne and Lorraine away? Then I don't suppose we'll stay," exclaimed Cousin Marcella Carter, who had a long, thin face, a long, thin nose, and a long, thin mouth. "You must stay for supper, of course," said Marigold resolutely. "Have you got anything good for us to eat?" asked Cousin Marcus with a chuckle. He had a square face with a spiky mustache and bristly white eyebrows. Marigold thought she did not like him, and was glad she did not have to call him uncle. "I know the Cloud of Spruce pantry is always well supplied," said Mrs. Dr. Palmer, smiling. In her smooth gray silk dress she looked, Marigold decided, just like a nice, sleek gray cat. "Well, give us something that will stick to our ribs," said Cousin Marcus. "We've had dinner at a place. I won't say where, but there was heaps of style and precious little comfort." "Marcus," said Cousin Marcella rebukingly. "Fact. And now, Marigold, I'll give you a quarter for a kiss." Cousin Marcus was quite genial. A joke was his idea of being kind and friendly, but Marigold did not know this, and she resented it. Lifting her head as she had seen Vivara do, she said freezingly, "I don't sell kisses." The visitors laughed. Jack Carter said, "She's saving her kisses for me, Dad." There was another laugh. Marigold shot a furious glance at Jack. She did not like boys, any boys, and she at once hated Jack. He was about 13 with a fat moon face, straight whitish hair parted in the middle, staring china blue eyes and spectacles. Under the ordinary circumstances, Marigold could and would have annihilated him with ease and pleasure. She had not sparred with Tommy Blair 4 years without learning how to handle the sex. But a Cloud of Spruce hostess must not show discourtesy to any guest. "She's got a nice mouth for kissing, anyhow," said Cousin Marcus, more genially than ever. Marigold left her guests in the orchard room and flew to the pantry. She was breathless with excitement, but she knew exactly what was to be done. There were plenty of cold-boiled chicken and ham left over from the previous day. The Cloud of Spruce jam pots were full as always, cream galore for whipping, but hot biscuits. There must be hot biscuits and cake. If Marigold had been asked if she could cook, she might have answered like canny great Uncle Malcolm when asked if he could play the violin. He couldn't say he'd never tried. Marigold had never tried. She could boil potatoes and fry eggs, but further than that her culinary accomplishments as yet did not go. But she was going to try now. She had the Cloud of Spruce cookbook, and she had helped Salome and Mother scores of times, looking forward with delight to the time that she would be allowed to do it on her own bat. She clasped floury hands over the cake bowl. "Oh, dear God, I think I can manage the biscuits, but you must help me with the cake." Then she proceeded to mix, measure, and beat. To make matters worse, Jack appeared. Jack was not happy unless he was teasing somebody. He proceeded to tease Marigold, not having any idea that it was a dangerous pastime, even when protected by Cloud of Spruce custom. "I'm a terrible fellow," he declared. "I throw dead cats into wells. Suppose I throw yours." "I'll get Lazar to call the new pig after you," said Marigold scornfully, and cracked an egg with violence. Jack stared. What kind of girl was this? "I'm just over the measles," he said. "Black measles. Ever had measles?" "No." "Mumps?" "No." "I've had mumps, and whooping cough, and scarlet fever, and chicken pox, and pneumonia. I'm a wow to have things. You ever had any of them?" "No." "Did you ever have anything?" Jack was plainly contemptuous. "Yes," said Marigold, suddenly recalling some of Aunt Marigold's diagnoses. "I've had urticaria." Jack stared again, but more respectfully. "Golly, is it bad?" "Incurable," said Marigold mendaciously. "You never get over it." Jack edged away. "Is it catching?" "You couldn't catch it." There was that in Marigold's tone Jack didn't like. Did this Poland girl think she had something he couldn't have? "Look here," he said furiously, "you give yourself airs that don't belong to you, and your nose is crooked, see?" Marigold crimsoned to the tip of the offending nose, but tradition held she spared Jack's life. "But if I ever meet you away from Cloud of Spruce, I'll ask you to put your ears on for you," she thought as she measured the baking powder. "What are you thinking of?" queried Jack, resenting her silence. "I'm imagining how you'll look in a coffin," answered Marigold deliberately. This gave Jack to think. Was it safe to be alone with a girl who could imagine such things? But to leave her was to confess defeat. "In 5 minutes by that clock I'm going to kiss you," he said with a fiendish grin. Marigold shuddered and shut her eyes. "If you do, I'll tell everybody at supper what a sweet-looking baby you were." That got under Jack's skin. He wished he was well out of the pantry, in the presence of this exasperating creature. He shifted to a new point of attack. "My, but I'm sorry for the man you're going to marry." Marigold tossed tradition to the winds. "Oh, never mind," she said. "Your wife will be able to sympathize with him." "Don't waste your breath now," drawled Jack. "It's my breath." "Think you're smart, don't you?" "I don't think it. I know it," retorted Marigold, beating her cake batter terrifically. "After all, you're only a female," said Jack insolently. "I heard you pinned a dishcloth to a minister's coat once," said Marigold. But the minute she said it, she knew she had made a mistake. He was proud of it. "What are you two young devils up to?" demanded Cousin Marcus, peering in at the door. "Oh, fond of the boys, I see, Marigold. Come along, Jack. Lazar is going to show us the apple orchard." Jack, as relieved to be rid of Marigold as she was to be rid of him, vanished. Marigold breathed a sigh of thanksgiving. Oh, would her cake be all right? That wretched boy had bothered her so. Had she put in the baking powder? The cake was a gorgeous success. Marigold was a Lesley, and besides there was Providence, or luck. It was a delicious feathery concoction, with whipped cream and golden orange crescents in it, the special company cake of Cloud of Spruce. And Marigold had just as good fortune with her biscuits. Then she set the table with the hem-stitched cloth and grandmother's best coal-port. Every domestic rite of Cloud of Spruce was properly performed. The ham was sliced in thin pink slices, the chicken platter was parsley fringed, the white cake basket with the china roses round it was brought out, the water in the tumblers was ice cold. Marigold sat behind the teacups, facing the ordeal before her, a gallant and smiling hostess. She could feel her pulses beating in her fingertips. If only her hands would not tremble. She steadied her legs by twisting them around the rungs of the chair. Cousin Marcus did what in him lay to rattle her by conjuring her not to fill the cup so full with tea that there wasn't any room for cream, as mean Aunt Harriet always did. And Dr. Palmer helped the chicken so lavishly that she broke out into a cold perspiration lest there would be enough to go around. Mrs. Dr. Palmer took cream and no sugar, and Dr. Palmer took sugar and no cream, but Cousin Marcella took neither, and Cousin Marcus took both. Cousin Olivia took cambric tea. It was very difficult to remember everything, but she thoroughly enjoyed asking Jack how he took his. It seemed to put him in his place for once. Eventually, everybody got something to drink, and the chicken did go round. Jack kept quiet for a while, being fully occupied with gorging. But just as it had dawned on Marigold that the supper was almost over, and had gone very well, Jack said, "Say, Marigold, you can cook. If you'll promise to have any slippers warm for me every night when I come home, I'll come back and marry you when I grow up." "I wouldn't marry you." "Oh, come now, my duck," said Jack with an irritating snigger. "Wait till you're asked." "So you were courting in the pantry," chuckled Cousin Marcus. Jack grinned like a Chessy cat. "Marigold has such a nice little way of cuddling in your arms, Dad." He hadn't really meant to say it, but it suddenly struck him as a very clever thing to say. Marigold positively came out in goose flesh. You couldn't know if I had." "You're beginning young," said Cousin Marcus solemnly, pretending to shake his head over the doings of modern youth. Marigold had a stroke of diabolical inspiration. "Johnsy is still telling his dreams," she said coolly. That Johnsy was what Jack would have called a mean wallop. He dared not open his mouth again at the table, and did not recover his impudence until they were leaving. "Isn't that a lovely moon?" said Marigold softly, more to herself than anyone, as she stood by the car. "You should see the moons we have in Los Angeles," he boasted. "What do you really think of him?" said Uncle Marcus in a pig's whisper, giving Marigold a poke in the ribs. Marigold remembered that Salome had once said, that Rose John had once said, that if there was one thing more than another that lent spice to life, it was tormenting the men. "I think Johnsy isn't really half as big a fool as he looks," she said condescendingly. Cousin Marcus roared with laughter. "You've said a mouthful," he exclaimed. Jack was crimson with rage. The car rolled away, and Marigold stood by the gate, victorious. "I don't know how it is some girls like boys," she said. When Grandmother and Mother came home, slightly annoyed, though they did not know it, that great-uncle William Lesley had been so inconsiderate as not to have died after all the bother had been rallied surprisingly, they had already heard the news, having met Cousin Marcus on the road. "Marigold, did you make the cake?" "Cousin Marcella said she wanted the recipe of our cake." "Yes," said Marigold. Grandmother sighed with relief. "Thank goodness. When I heard there was cake, I thought you must have borrowed it from Mrs. Donkin, like Rose John. You didn't forget to put the pickles on?" "No, I put the pickles and chow both." "And you're sure you didn't slop any tea over in the saucers?" "I'm sure." Mother hugged Marigold in the blue room upstairs. "Darling, you're a brick. Grandmother and I felt dreadful until we found out there was cake." End of chapter 17.
Chapter 18 of Magic for Marigold. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Magic for Marigold by Lucy Maud Montgomery. Chapter 18. Red Ink or 1. Marigold thought the world a charming place at all times, but especially in September, when the hills were blue and the great wheat fields along the harbor shore warm gold, and the glens of autumn full of shimmering leaves. Marigold always felt that there was something in the fall that belonged to her, and her alone, if she could only find it. And this secret quest made of September and October months of magic. To be sure, there was generally school in September, but not this September for Marigold. She had not been quite herself through the August heat, so Mother and Grandmother and Aunt Marigold, who remembered that she was an M.D. in her own right when Uncle Clon let her remember it, advised that she be kept out of school for some weeks longer. Then Aunt Irene Winthrop wrote to Mother and asked her to let Marigold visit her and Uncle Maurice. Aunt Irene was Mother's sister, and the Winthrops and the Leslies were none too fond of each other. Grandmother rather grimly said she thought Marigold would be just as well at home. "We let her visit Aunt Anne last year," said Mother. "I suppose Irene thinks it is her turn now." Mother was too timid, or too good a diplomat, to say that she thought Marigold should visit her mother's people as well as her father's. But Grandmother understood it that way, and offered no further objection. So Marigold went to Uncle Maurice and Aunt Irene at Owl's Hill. A name like that fascinated Marigold. Any name with a hill in it was beautiful, and Owl's Hill was magical. Uncle Maurice and Aunt Irene were secretly a little afraid that Marigold might be lonesome and homesick, but Marigold never thought of such a thing. She liked Owl's Hill tremendously. Such a romantic spot on a high sloping hill with a little tree-smothered village snuggling at its foot, and above it woods, where at night sounded laughter that was merry but not human, while other hills lay beyond like green wave after wave. Uncle Maurice's face was so red and beaming that Marigold felt he made fine weather out of the gloomiest day. And Aunt Irene was like Mother, only she laughed more, not being a widow, and having no grandmother living with her. There was a long letter to be written every night to Mother, in which Marigold told her everything that happened during the day. She always went down the lane to put it in the mailbox herself every morning. And there was Amy Josephs, of the chubby, agreeable brown-faced, next door, to play with. Amy was the daughter of Uncle Maurice's brother, so a cousin of sorts, if you like. Amy made a fairly satisfactory playmate who really seemed to have a dim conception of what Marigold meant when she talked of the laughter of bluebells and daisies, and they had good fun together. Amy's two village chums often came up the hill to play with them. Marigold liked them fairly well also. Not one of the three was anything like as good a playmate as Sylvia, but Marigold carefully concealed this thought, because she was beginning to feel that it was a bit queer that she should like an imaginary playmate better than real ones. But there it was. One of Amy's chums was a very fat little girl with a most romantic name, June Page. A fair girl with hair so flaxen that beside it Marigold shone like spun gold. Caroline Chrysler was a missionary's daughter. She sent home from India. Caroline, apart from her insistence on the fact that she was going to be a missionary too, had been consecrated to it in her cradle, was quite a nice girl. It wasn't her fault that she was dark and sallow. Perhaps not her fault that she wouldn't be called Carrie, too frivolous for a consecrated. Marigold, who had once believed herself consecrated too, could not be too hard on Caroline's poses. So they all got on very well, each having her own private opinion of the others, and every new dawn that broke across the autumn upland ushered in a day full of interest and delight. Even Sundays, Marigold loved going down to church Sunday evenings with Aunt Irene and Amy. They always went down across the fields to the road. Aunt Irene always carried a little lantern because, though it was only crisp steel-blue twilight when they left, it was dark long before they reached the church. The lantern cast such fascinating, shivery, giant shadows. They went along the edge of the sheep pasture. Marigold loved the cool grass under her feet and the soft, eerie sighs in the trees, the sweet wild odors of the wandering winds, and the elfin laugh of the hidden brook down under the balsam boughs. There was a smell of aftermath clover in the air, and the Milky Way was overhead. All around were misty stars over the harvest fields. One really felt too happy for Sunday. Aunt Irene never talked much, and Amy and Marigold talked in whispers. "I wonder if Hip Price will be in church tonight," said Amy. "Who is Hip Price?" asked Marigold. "He's the minister's son. His real name is Howard Ingraham Price, but he never gets anything but Hip, from his initials. He's awfully clever. I never," vowed Amy, speaking out of her tremendous experience of 11.5 years, "met anyone who knew so much. And he's so brave. He saved a little girl from drowning once at the risk of his life." "When?" "Oh, before he came here. They only moved to this church last spring. He says he can lick his weight in wildcats, and he took the diploma for learning the whole shorter catechism by heart." Marigold felt rather bored with this prodigy. "What does he look like?" "He's handsome. His eyes are just like an archangel's," said Amy fervently. "How do you know? Did you ever see an archangel's eyes?" demanded Marigold relentlessly. 2. The choir was singing Joy to the World, and Marigold was thinking of Title King of Nations in the chapter the minister had just read. That phrase always fascinated her whenever she heard it. There was something so mysterious about it. Title King of Nations was so much grander than just Title King of one little country. Splendid, triumphal, an entrancing figure of royalty, ruling over hundreds of subject peoples. And then Marigold saw Hip and thought no more forever of Title King of Nations. He was sitting right across from her in the corner seat staring at her. He continued to stare at her. Marigold felt that glance on her inescapably. She tried to look away. She fought against looking back. But in the end, her eyes always returned to the corner seat to find his eyes still intent on her. Eyes can say so much in a second. Marigold felt very queer. And oh, he was handsome, just like the slim princeling of fairy tales. Brown curls shining in the lamplight, cheeks rose-red under golden tan, dark blue romantic eyes. She felt that she would die of shame and humiliation when an old lady behind her suddenly held a peppermint out to her over the back of the seat. Marigold had to take it, and could not help looking at Hip as she did it. She could not, would not, did not eat it, but she felt as if Hip must see it all the time, moist and sticky in her warm, unwilling hand, and despise her for a baby who had to be kept good in church with peppermints. Marigold, to her dying day, never quite forgave Aunt Lucy Bates, who thought she had done a kind act to Lorraine Winthrop's little girl. Marigold found her legs were trembling when she got up for the last hymn. Her face was burning under Hip's seemingly mesmerized eyes. She was sure every living soul in the church must notice him. One at least had. Marigold met Caroline on the porch going out, and it seemed to her that Caroline was a bit cool. "Did you see Hip Price?" asked Caroline. "Hip Price?" Marigold was not without the feminine knack of protective coloration. "Who is he?" "That boy in the corner seat. I saw him staring at you. He always stares like that at a new girl." Sly thing, thought Marigold, not meaning Hip. Amy did not go back with them. She was staying all night with June. So Marigold walked alone with Aunt Irene. Not altogether alone. On the other side of the road, until they reached the pasture gate, stalked a slender figure with a smart cap worn a bit rakishly on the back of its head. The figure whistled the long, long trail. Marigold knew that it was Hip Price, and she also knew that the manse was away on the other side of the church. It is terrific what damsels of 11 do know sometimes. But she was almost glad when they left the road and started up over the fields. As they walked along, Marigold was not thinking of the charm of starlit evening, or the wind in the trees, or the pixie lantern shadows. I shall not tell you what she was thinking of. I will only state that next day she scorched a panful of cookies she had been left to watch because she was thinking of the same thing. Aunt Irene was annoyed. A cloud of Spruce Lesley was supposed never to be careless, but Marigold, with shining eyes and a dreamy smile lingering on her lips, did not worry about the cookies at all. 3. During the following 3 weeks, life was a thing of rainbows for our Marigold. She had a delightful secret, a secret that nobody knew. Even when she wrote everything to Mother, she did not tell her about Hip Bryce, though she put an extra row of kisses to make up for it. The morning after that memorable Sunday evening when Marigold went down to the lane to mail Mother's letter, she found a letter in the box addressed to herself. Marigold trembled again, a delicious trembling. She sat down among the goldenrod under a friendly little spruce tree and read it. It was a very wonderful epistle. Ask Marigold. To be told she was beautiful. Once in a while she had heard a hint that she was pretty, but beautiful. And what did it matter that he spelled angel, angle? Angel really was a very tricky word. Anybody might spell it wrong. Besides, doesn't everybody know that it doesn't make a mite of difference how a love letter is spelled? He signed himself Fondestly Yours with lots of flourishes and curlicues, and there was a little X for a P.S. Marigold's cheeks were so rosy when she went back to the house that Aunt Irene thought the child was picking up wonderfully. Marigold slept at night with Hip's letter under her pillow, and found another in the mailbox the next morning, in which he asked her if she were going to June Page's party Thursday evening, and would she wear the blue dress she had worn to church. Would she? She had been wondering which of her two good dresses became her most, and had been dangerously near selecting the green. And he wrote, "When the moon rises tonight, think of me, and I'll think of you." Marigold hunted out the time of moonrise in the almanac. Really, the moons of Owl's Hill were wonderful. Cloud of Spruce never had such moons. And would any other boy she knew ever think of saying a thing like that? Not in 1,000 years. Hip cornered her off at the party and asked her why she hadn't answered his letters. Marigold didn't think she could without Aunt Irene knowing. "But you don't mind my writing them?" asked Hip, softly, tenderly, looking at her as if his very life depended on her answer. Marigold, dyed in blushes, confessed she didn't, whereupon Hip surveyed the room with an air of a conqueror. When called upon to recite, he gave Casabianca in ringing tones, standing all beautiful and brave as the immortal hero. A horrible thought suddenly arose in Marigold's mind. Did he know he was all beautiful and brave? She strangled and buried the hateful intruder instantly. He was certainly captivating. He said such smart, up-to-date things like attaboy and applesauce and I'll tell the world, looking at Marigold to see if she admired his smartness. And he walked home with her. Not exactly from the house. He joined her on the road, having dashed across lots. And at the gate of Owl's Hill he took her hand and kissed it. Marigold had read of young knights doing that, but that it should happen to her! It was thrilling to hear of all the deeds of high emprise Hip had done, that he had once saved a little girl from being burned to death. Amy must have got it twisted. That he often climbed to the very top of telegraph poles. That he had once stopped a team of runaway horses by his own unaided prowess. That he would, on occasion, really relish a fight with blood-maddened tigers. As for sea serpents, take Hip's word for it, they ate out of his hand. "I don't believe he's done all the wonderful things he's always talking about," Amy said scornfully once. Marigold knew what that meant. Just sheer jealousy. And of course it was also jealousy that led Caroline to say that Hip had bitten his sister when he was 4 years old, and left open old Mr. Simon's gate on purpose so that the pigs could get into the garden. Marigold did not believe a word of it. She had such a funny feeling when other people pronounced his name. It was thrilling to go to church and listen to Mr. Price preaching. His father. Marigold hated old Tom Ainsworth for sleeping in church. And there was one almost painfully rapturous day when she and Amy were invited to the manse to tea. To eat a meal at the same table with Hip was something in the nature of a rite, with the big maple rustling outside the window, on which, Hip told her, he had cut their intertwined initials. How bitterly she resented it when his mother told him to keep his elbow off the table and not talk with his mouth full. And every morning, that romantic journey to the mailbox to find a letter, a delightful letter. There were times when Marigold felt, though she would not admit it even to herself, that she really liked Hip's letters much better than Hip himself. In one, he told her she was his little queen, and he had written that especial sentence in red ink. Or, was it? Could be. Marigold had heard of such things. She pitied every other girl, especially the consecrated Caroline, and thought of Hip every time the moon rose or didn't rise. "You are so different from everybody else," Hip told her. Clever Hip. 4. The course of true love, even at 11, never runs smooth. There came a dreadful day when she and Hip almost quarreled. Marigold had been told a certain shameful little secret by Netta Carroll about M. Dawes. M. Dawes was living with an aunt down in the village, because her father and mother were divorced, true as you live. Netta had heard about it over in Halifax, and cross your heart, you were never to tell a word of it. Marigold promised solemnly she would never tell. And then Hip, with his uncanny nose for secrets, discovered that Marigold had one, and coaxed her to tell him. Marigold wanted to tell him, yearned to tell him, felt her heart must really break if she didn't tell him, but there was her solemn promise. Leslie's did not break their solemn promises. It was a custom of their caste. Hip grew angry when he found her so unexpectedly unmalleable, and when anger gave him nothing, except perhaps the look in Marigold's face, he became sad and reproachful. She didn't like him a bit, of course, when she wouldn't tell him what she and Netta had been whispering about that time. "If you don't tell me," said Hip earnestly, "I'll go and drown myself. When you see me lying dead, you'd wish you'd told me." Hip rather overreached himself there, because Marigold didn't believe at all that there was the slightest fear of his drowning himself. She stuck gallantly to her determination not to tell, despite his pleadings. And then the next afternoon, when it became known that Hip Price had disappeared and could not be found anywhere, though everybody in the community was madly searching for him, Marigold thought she must die. Had Hip actually drowned himself because he thought she did not like him? Had he? The dread was intolerable. How terrible to live all your life remembering that someone had drowned himself because of you. Who could support such a prospect? "I heard a dog howling under my window last night," sobbed Amy. "Mother says that's a sure sign of death." "That was only old Lazy Murphy's dog. Surely you don't think he knows anything," protested Marigold. She was resentful of Amy's crying. What right had Amy to cry about Hip? She, Marigold, could not cry. Her dread went too deep for tears. "His mother believes he's kidnapped," said Amy, hunting for a dry spot in her handkerchief. "She's just been going from one fainting fit to another all day. But some say he was seen going down the river in that leaky old boat of Shanty George's. Certain Des Shanty George says it was. Oh, I won't sleep a wink tonight." Then came Caroline and June, and Caroline and June were also in tears, which did not improve the looks of either of them. Or their tempers, evidently. Caroline was shrewish. "I don't see what you're crying about, June Page. He wasn't your minister's son. You're a Baptist." "I guess I've as good a right to cry as you," retorted June. "Hip was my friend, my special friend. He thought more of me than of any girl in Owl's Hill. He's told me so dozens of times. He told me I was different from anybody he'd ever met. Cry? I will cry. Just you try to stop me." An unbecoming red flush had risen in Caroline's pale face. "Did Hip Price really tell you that?" she asked in a queer voice. Marigold, in the background, stood as if turned to the proverbial stone. Amy had put her handkerchief in her pocket. "Yes, he did, and wrote it. I've had a letter from him every day for weeks." "So have I," said Caroline. June in her turn stopped crying and glared at Caroline. "You haven't." "I have. I can show them to you. And he told me I was different from anyone he ever knew and that he couldn't help being crazy about me." "He wrote me that too," said June. They looked at each other. No more tears were shed for Hip, nor would be if he were lying 40 fathoms deep. "Did he ever kiss your hand?" demanded Caroline. June giggled, a giggle that seemed to make everything ugly. "More than that," she said significantly. Marigold involuntarily brushed something from her hand. The power of thought had returned to her. She was very thankful now that she hadn't been able to cry. There were no stains on her face. Calmly, proudly as any Lesley of them all, she drained her cup of wormwood and gall. June began to cry again, in self-pity this time. The Pages, Marigold reflected disdainfully, had no pride. "He called me his little queen," she sobbed, "and said I had a crown of golden hair." To call June Page's hair golden when it was just tow-colored, and fancy a little queen with a nose like a dab of putty. Oh, it was to laugh. Caroline did not cry, but she looked very limp. She had been also little queened, and he said my eyes were so sweet and provoking. To think of those round pale eyes of Caroline's being called sweet and provoking. Oh, of course Hip had left old Simon's gate open and bit his sister. Bit her frequently, not a doubt of it. "He's just been a regular mean, two-faced, deceitful little sneak," said June violently, "and I hope he is drowned, I do." "I didn't think a minister's son would do that," said Caroline mournfully. There was something especially terrible about a minister's son doing a thing like that. Whom could one trust if not a minister's son? "I believe they are the worst sometimes," said June. "Well, you can have him." "I don't want him," said Caroline superbly, remembering at last that she was consecrated. They went away on that note. Amy looked guiltily at Marigold. I wasn't going to tell them," she said, "but I got letters from Hip too. Lovely letters. I can't believe he didn't mean them. Of course he was just fooling them, but—" "He was fooling everybody," said Marigold shortly, "and we needn't worry over his being drowned. He'll turn up safe and sound. I'm going home to write to Mother." Marigold did write to Mother, not telling her quite everything, however. But first she burned a packet of schoolboy love letters. She felt as if she had been mixed up in something very grimy, and she suddenly felt a great longing to be sitting on the old wharf below Crowd of Spruce, watching the boats coming in and feeling the clear, fresh sea breeze from the dunes blowing in her face. Oh, how she hated and despised Hip Price. But what was it old grandmother had said once? that it was the hardest thing in the world to be just. I guess I was as much to blame as Hip, admitted Marigold candidly. All that saved her self-respect was the fact that she had not told him the secret. 5. Hip turned up safe and sound the next day. He had gone for a day's ride with Lazy Murphy's son the peddler, and Lazy Murphy's horse had taken sick 18 miles away in a place where there was no telephone. So Owl's Hill folks gave up searching, and Mrs. Price recovered from her fainting fits, and Hip came straight up to Owl's Hill to see Marigold. It was rather unfortunate that Hip should have selected that day for appearing out in kilts. He had thin legs. "Come on for a walk down to the pasture spring," he whispered. "No, thank you, Howard." Hip had never heard that an enchantment is at an end as soon as the enchanter is called by name, but he knew there was something wrong with Marigold, standing there, the very incarnation of disdain. "What's the matter? You don't look as if you were glad to see me back, and I was thinking of you every minute I was away." "And about June and Caroline, too?" asked Marigold sweetly, as one who knew her Hip at last. For the first time since she had known him, Hip lost face. "So they blabbed," he said. "Why, I was just seeing how much they'd believe. It was different with you. Honest, you've got them skinned a mile." "I think you'd better go home," said Marigold sarcastically. "Your mother may be anxious about you. She might even take a fainting fit. Goodbye." Marigold went away stiffly, regally, without a backward glance. Hip had not drowned himself in despair over her lack of confidence, but he was for her not only dead, but, as the French would say, very dead. He was never very interesting anyhow, not even as much as Johnsy, she thought, suddenly clear-sighted. It seemed years since she had left home. At the end of that long red road were Mother and Sylvia and Cloud of Spruce. She felt clean once more. "I guess it was only red ink after all," she said. End of chapter 18.
Chapter 19 of Magic for Marigold. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by ChrisALMI. Magic for Marigold by Lucy Maud Montgomery. How it came to pass. When Marigold had gone to visit Aunt Anne and Aunt Irene, something was started. Grandmother gloomily said, "They'll all be wanting her now." And her prediction was speedily fulfilled. Aunt Marcia wanted her share of Marigold too. "If Anne and Irene Winthrop could have her, I think I should too. She's never spent a night in my house. My favorite brother's child," she said reproachfully. So Grandmother, with a look of, "I told you so," and Mother, with a look of, "How can I do without Marigold again?" consented rather unwillingly. "Jarvis is so odd," said Grandmother to Mother. Grandmother had very little use for Jarvis Pringle, even if he were her son-in-law. Nobody in the clan had much use for him. He was known to have got up once in the middle of the night to dot an I in a letter that he had written that evening. As Uncle Clon had said, that was carrying things rather too far. Marigold did not know, as the grown-ups of the clan knew, that he had lived all his life with the shadows of madness hanging over him. She did not know what Uncle Clon meant when he said that Jarvis took the universe too seriously. But she did know she had never seen Uncle Jarvis smile, and when Uncle Jarvis once asked her if she loved God, and she had said yes, she had the oddest feeling that she was really telling a lie, because her God was certainly not the God Uncle Jarvis was inquiring about. And she did know that she didn't like Uncle Jarvis. She loved him, of course. You have to love your relations. But she didn't like him. Not one little bit. She always made her small self scarce when he came to visit Cloud of Spruce. She did not know he had the face of a fanatic, but she knew he had a high, narrow, knobby forehead, deep-set, intolerant eyes, austere, merciless mouth, and a probing nose, which he had a horrible habit of pulling. Also a fierce, immense black beard, which he would never even trim, because that would have been unscriptural and contrary to the will of God. Uncle Jarvis knew all about the will of God, or thought he did. Nobody could go to heaven who did not believe exactly as he did. He argued, or rather dogmatized, with everyone. Marigold was so small a fish that she generally slipped through the meshes of his theological nets, and he paid scant attention to her. But she wondered sometimes if Uncle Jarvis would really be contented in heaven, with nobody to frown at, and a dreadful God who hated to see you the least bit happy. Nevertheless, she was pleased at the prospect of another visit. Uncle Jarvis and Aunt Marcia also lived over the bay, which of course had a magic sound in Marigold's ears. And she loved Aunt Marcia, who had calm, sea-blue eyes and only one doctrine, that everybody needs a bit of spoiling now and then. Her pies praised her in the gates, and she was renowned for a lovely cake called upside-down cake, the secret of which nobody else in the clan possessed. Marigold knew she would have a good time with Aunt Marcia. And Uncle Jarvis couldn't be round all the time. Grain must be cut and chores done, no matter how dreadful the goings-on might be in your household during your absence. So she went to Yarrow Lane Farm, where she found a low-eaved old house under dark spruces and a garden that looked as if God smiled occasionally at least. Aunt Marcia's garden, of course. The only thing in the gardening line Uncle Jarvis concerned himself with was the row of little round trimmed spruces along the fence of the front yard. Uncle Jarvis really enjoyed pruning them every spring, snipping off all the rebellious tips, as he would have liked to snip off the holder of every doctrine he didn't agree with. Marigold had a room with a bed so big she felt lost in it, and a small square window looking out on the silver-tipped waves of the bay. She had the dearest little bowl to eat her porridge out of. It made even porridge taste good, and the upside-down cake was all fond fancy had painted it. Uncle Jarvis did not bother her much, though she was always secretly terrified at his gloomy prayers. Why, Marigold wondered, must one groan so when one talks to God? Her own little prayers were cheerful affairs, but perhaps they oughtn't to be? The only unpleasant day was Sunday. Uncle Jarvis was almost as bad as the man in another of graceless Uncle Claude's stories who hung his cat because she caught a mouse on Sunday. When he heard Marigold laugh the first Sunday she was at Yarrow Lane, he told her sternly that she must never laugh on a Sunday in his house. Whatever may be done at godless clouds of spruce, his manner seemed to say, though his tongue didn't. 2. Marigold was not long at Yarrow Lane before she picked up a chum. By the end of a week, she and Bernice Willis had known each other all their lives. Aunt Marcia had rather expected Marigold to chum with Babe Kennedy on the next farm, who lived much nearer than Bernice, and Babe was very ready to be chummed with. But chumship, like kissing, goes by favor. Marigold simply did not like Babe. A pretty little doll, with hair of pale, shining, silky red, pale green eyes, an inquisitive expression, and an irritating little snigger that set Marigold's nerves on edge. She would have none of her. Bernice was the choice of her heart, the first real friend she'd ever had, the first real rival to Sylvia. Bernice lived half a mile away, with an odd old aunt in the house behind the young spruce wood. The very description intrigued Marigold. The young spruce wood. So delightful. What charming things must foregather in a young spruce wood. Bernice was ugly, but clever. She had uncut, mouse-colored hair and big, friendly gray eyes and a thin, freckled face. A face that seemed meant for laughter, although it was generally a little sad. Her father and mother were both dead, and Bernice did not seem to have any relatives in the world except the aforesaid odd old aunt. Lots of the girls in Lador, even magical over-the-bay places have to have post office names, didn't like her. But it happened that she and Marigold talked the same language, liked the same things. They could both have supped on a saucer of moonshine and felt no hunger. Well, for a time anyhow. They both understood the stories the wind told. They both liked silk-soft kittens and the little fir woods that ran venturesomely down to the shore and the dancing harbor ripples like songs. A bluebird singing on the point of a picket in the yarrow lane thrilled them, and an imaginary trip to the moon was all in an evening's work, and they made every day a gay adventure for themselves. "You'll find out she isn't as good as you think," Babe told Marigold with sinister significance. But that, Marigold believed, was only Babe's jealousy. 3. Then one night, Marigold and Bernice had the supreme bliss of sleeping together, and not only of sleeping together, but sleeping in the granary loft, the little white granary across the small hollow field, carpeted with sheets of green moss and full of birch trees. Such a romantic thing. Aunt Marcia had told Marigold to ask Bernice to stay all night with her, and soon after Bernice's arrival, 2 loaded automobiles came out from Charlottetown. The guests must be put up somehow for the night. The little house was taxed to its limit. Marigold's room must be commandeered in the emergency. But what was the matter with sleeping in a neat little granary loft this warm September night? Aunt Marcia would make them up a comfortable bed if they wouldn't be afraid. Afraid? Bernice and Marigold hooted at that idea. They were all for it at once. So after they had prowled about till nearly 10, Bernice had gone to bed at 8 every night of her life, and Marigold was supposed to go. They went through the moonlit birches with their nighties under their arms and a huge piece of apple pie in their paws. Aunt Marcia actually let people eat pie at night. Perhaps that accounted for some of Uncle Jarvis's religious gloom. They took a drink from the truly delightful stoned-up spring behind the granary, which Uncle Jarvis called the barn well, and then mounted the outside granary stairs to the loft. Its bare boards were beautifully whitewashed, and Aunt Marcia had made up a bed on the floor and covered it with charming white quilt that had the red rising suns all over it. She had set a lighted candle on a barrel for them, feeling that it would never do to give them a kerosene lamp in the granary. They bolted the door, more romance, and blew out the candle to have the fun of undressing by moonlight. It was when they were ready for bed that Marigold made her shocking discovery. "Now let's say our prayers and snuggle down for a good jaw," she said. "We can talk just as long as we like tonight, and nobody to pound on the wall and tell us to stop." Bernice turned from the loft window, whence she had been gazing rapturously on the glimpse of the moonlit bay over the birches. "I never say any prayers," she announced calmly. Marigold gasped. "Why, Bernice Willis, that is wicked. Aren't you afraid God will punish you?" "There isn't any God," said Bernice, "and I won't pray to anyone I don't believe in." Marigold stared at her. This thing had been said, and yet the granary still stood, and Bernice still stood, a slim white skeptic in the moonlight. But, Bernice, there must be a God." "How do you know?" "Mother told me," said Marigold, gasping at the first argument that presented itself to her dumbfounded mind. "She told you there was a Santa Claus too, didn't she?" asked Bernice relentlessly. "Mind you, I'd like to believe in God, but I can't." "Why not?" wondered Marigold helplessly. Because I haven't anybody. Nobody but Aunt Harriet, and she's only a half-aunt, and she doesn't like me a bit. Father and Mother are dead, and she won't even talk to me about them. I had a kitten, and it died, and she won't let me have another. As for this praying business, I used to pray. Once when I was so small I can just remember it, Aunt Harriet sent me down to the store on an errand. The wind was awful cold, and I knelt right down on the road behind the little spruce bush and asked God to make the wind warmer before I came out of the store. He didn't. It was colder than ever and right in my face. And when my kitten took sick, I asked God to make it well. But it died. And then I knew there was no God. Because if there had been, he wouldn't have let my kitten die when it was the only thing I had to love. So I never prayed anymore. Of course, I have to kneel down when Aunt Harriet says family prayers. But I just kneel and I make faces at God. You just said you don't believe in him, cried Marigold. Well, Bernice was not going to be posed. I make faces at the idea of him. So this, Marigold reflected bitterly, was what Babe Kennedy had meant. Besides, look at me, continued Bernice rebelliously. See how ugly I am? Look at the size of my mouth. Why did God make me ugly? Babe Kennedy says I have a face like a monkey's. You haven't? And think of how clever you are, cried Marigold. I want to be pretty, said Bernice stubbornly. Then people might like me. But I don't believe in God, and I'm not going to pretend I do. Marigold got up, with a long sigh of adjustment, flung her arms around Bernice. Never mind. I love you. I love you whether you believe in God or not. I only wish you did. It's so much nicer. I won't have you long, said Bernice, determinedly pessimistic. Something will happen to take you away too. Nothing can happen, Marigold challenged fate. Of course I'll have to go home when my visit's ended, but we'll write. And I'll get Mother to ask you to cloud a spruce and we'll be friends forever. Bernice shook her head. No, something will happen. You'll see. This is too good to last. A new fear assailed Marigold. Bernice, if you don't believe in God, how can you expect to go to heaven? I don't, and I don't want to, Bernice answered defiantly. Aunt Harriet read about heaven in the Bible. All shut up with walls and gates. I'd hate that. But wouldn't it be better than hell? No, you wouldn't have to pretend you liked hell if you didn't. But I don't believe in either place. Bernice, don't you believe in the Bible at all? Not one word of it. It's all about God, and there isn't any God. It's just a fairy tale. Somehow, this seemed more terrible to Marigold than not believing in God. God was far away and invisible, but the Bible was right in your hand, so to speak. She sighed again as she knelt to say her own prayers. It seemed a very lonely performance, with that little skeptic of Bernice standing rigidly by the window, disbelieving. But Marigold prayed for her very softly. Please, dear God, make Bernice believe in you. Oh, please, make Bernice believe in you. 4. At dinner time next day, Marigold made the mistake of her life. Aunt Marcia asked what she was worrying about, and Marigold confessed that she was, well, not exactly worrying about Bernice, but so sorry for her. Because, you see, she doesn't believe in God, and it must be terrible not to believe in God. What's that? Uncle Jarvis shot at her suddenly. What's that about Bernice Willis not believing in God? She says she doesn't, said Marigold mournfully. Poor child, said Aunt Marcia. Poor child? Wicked child, thundered Uncle Jarvis. If she doesn't believe in God, you'll not play with her again, Marigold. Oh, Jarvis, protested Aunt Marcia. I have said it. Uncle Jarvis stabbed a potato with a fork as if he were spearing an infidel. Woe to them that are at ease in Zion. We keep the 10 Commandments in this house. Oh, Jarvis, remember the poor child has no one to teach her, really. That queer old... Marcia, be silent. She has had plenty of opportunity in a Christian land to learn that there is a God. Doesn't she go to Sunday school and church? And Harriet Kane is an earnest Christian woman. There is no doubt Bernice has been taught the truth, but she is plainly not of the elect, and she is too wicked for you to play with. Why, I refused to shake hands with Dr. Clark because he said he believed there were 2 Isaiahs. Do you think I will tolerate infidelity? Aunt Marcia knew he was inexorable, and Marigold felt he was. She began to cry, though she knew tears would have no influence on Uncle Jarvis. Oh, Uncle Jarvis, if Bernice, comes to believe there is a God, can't I play with her then? Yes, but not till then. Uncle Jarvis gave his nose a frantic tweak, left the table, his black beard fairly bristling with indignation. Uncle Jarvis had one of his headaches that day, and so was more than usually theological. Aunt Marcia wanted him to take an aspirin to relieve it, but he would not. It was flying in the face of God to take an aspirin. If he sent you pain, it was for you to endure it. Aunt Marcia tried to comfort Marigold, but could not hold out much hope that Uncle Jarvis would change his mind. "Oh, if only I'd held my tongue," moaned Marigold. "It would have been wiser," agreed Aunt Marcia sadly. 30 years of living with Jarvis Pringle had taught her that. Marigold never forgot Bernice's sad little face when she told her Uncle Jarvis wouldn't let them play together any longer. "Didn't I tell you? I knew something would happen," she said, her lips quivering. "Oh, Bernice, couldn't you pretend you believe in him?" Marigold's voice faltered. She knew, deep in her soul, that this wasn't right, that a friendship so purchased must be poisoned at the core. Bernice knew it too. "I can't, Marigold, not even for you. It wouldn't be any use." "Oh, Bernice, if you could come and find out sometime that you do believe in him after all, you'll tell me, won't you? And then we can be friends again, promise?" Bernice promised. "But I won't. Isn't this very thing that's happened a proof? If there was a God, he'd know it would make me feel more than ever there wasn't." The week that followed was a very lonely one for Marigold. She missed Bernice dreadfully, and that hateful babe was always poking about, triumphing. "Didn't I tell you? I knew ages ago Bernice didn't believe there was a God. I'll bet he'll punish her right smart some of these days." "She doesn't pronounce sepulchre anyhow," retorted Marigold, thinking of the verse Babe had read in Sunday school the day before. Babe reddened. "I don't believe Miss Jackson knows how to pronounce it herself. You make me sick, Marigold Lesley. You're just mad because you found out your precious Bernice isn't the piece of perfection you thought her." "I'm not mad," said Marigold calmly. "I'm only sorry for you. It must be terrible to be you." Marigold prayed desperately every night for Bernice's conversion, prayed without a bit of faith that her prayer would be answered. She even tried to consult the minister about the matter the night he came to Yarrow Lane for supper. "Tut-tut, everybody believes in God," he said when Marigold timidly put a supposititious case. So that wasn't much help. Marigold thought wildly of refusing to eat unless Uncle Jarvis let her play with Bernice. But something told her that would not move Uncle Jarvis a hair's breadth. He would only tell Aunt Marcia to send her home. And the raspberries were thick on the hill, and there was a basket full of adorable kittens in the tumble-down barn. Uncle Jarvis was always so busy with theology that he hadn't time to patch up his barns. And it was a shame, so it was, that Bernice must miss all this just because she couldn't believe in God. 5. "I found out something about Bernice Willis. I found out something about Bernice Willis," chanted Babe Kennedy triumphantly, rocking on her heels and toes in the door of the granary loft, grinning like a Cheshire cat. Marigold looked scornfully over her shoulder from the corner where she was arranging her cupboard of broken dishes. "What have you found out?" "I'm not going to tell you," crowed Babe. "I'm going to tell Bernice, though. I gave her a hint of it this afternoon at the store, but I wasn't going to tell her then. I just gave her something to think of. I'm going right down to her aunt's to tell her as soon as I've taken Mrs. Carter's eggs to her. And it's awful. The awfulest thing you ever heard. You'll find out pretty soon. Everybody will. Well, bye-bye. I've got to be off. It's coming up a storm, I guess." Marigold made one swift bound across the granary, caught Babe by the arm, pulled her with a scant regard for her eggs into the loft, slammed and bolted the door, and stood with her back to it. "Now, you just tell me what you mean and no more nonsense about it." Marigold was not a Lesley for nothing. Babe surrendered. She snapped her thin-lipped, cruel little mouth shut, and then she opened it. Very well, then. Bernice Willis's father's not dead. Never was dead. He's in the penitentiary at Dorchester for stealing money. I don't believe it. Oh, it's true. Cross my heart. I overheard Mrs. Dr. Keyes from Charlottetown telling Ma all about it. He was in a bank, and he embezzled the money. So he was sent to the pen for 12 years, and his wife died of a broken heart, though Mrs. Keyes said that it was her extravagance drove him to stealing, and Bernice's Aunt Harriet took her. She was just a baby, and brought her up to think that her father was dead, too. Marigold wanted to disbelieve, but it was too hopelessly, horribly, evidently true. My, ain't I glad I never played with Bernice, gloated Babe. The daughter of a jailbird. Just think of her face when I tell her. Oh, Babe. Marigold stooped to plead with Babe Kennedy piteously. Oh, you're not going to tell her. Please, please don't tell her. I will so tell her. It'll bring that pride of hers down, carrying her head as high as if she came of honest people. If you were changed into a toad this minute, you'd only look like what you are, cried Marigold passionately. Babe laughed condescendingly. Of course you're sore after thinking nobody was good enough for you to play with but Bernice. Oh my, Miss Lesley, you can pull in your horns now, I guess. I'm going to tell Bernice right off. She'll have to know it anyhow soon. Her father'll soon be out of jail. I'm going to have the fun of telling her first. Think of her face. Now, you just open that door and let me out. Marigold did as she was ordered. The spirit was clean gone out of her. This was dreadful. Dreadful! No hope now that Bernice would ever believe in God. Marigold felt she could hardly blame her. Think of her face. And Marigold did think of it. That dear, freckled, sensitive, homely little face. When Babe told her the terrible truth. And of course, Babe would tell. Babe did so love to tell ugly things. Hadn't she told Katie Houseman that she was going to die? Hadn't she told the teacher Sally Ford had stolen Jane Mackenzie's pencil in school? If I could get there and tell Bernice first, said Marigold, if she has to hear it, she could stand it better for me. I could go by the lower road. Mrs. Carter lives on the upper road, and I could get there before Babe. But it's dark, and it's gonna rain. Marigold shuddered. She didn't mind being out after dark on a road she knew, but a road she didn't know, that was different. She ran down the granary stairs and across the birch field to the lower road. She must get to Bernice first. But oh, how weird and lonely that lower road was in the sudden swoops of wind and the sudden gushes of wan moonlight between the clouds. Melancholy dogs were howling to each other across the dark farms. The wind whistled dolefully in the fence corners. Something with red eyes glared out at her from under a bush. And the trees? By daylight, Marigold was a little sister to all the trees in the world, but trees took on such extraordinary shapes in the dark. A huge lion prowled through John Burnham's field. An enormous diabolical rooster strutted on the fence. A queer, elfish old man leered at her over a gate. A very devil squatted at the turn of the road. The whole walk was full of terrors. Marigold was in a cold reek of perspiration when she reached the house behind the young spruce wood and stumbled into the little kitchen where Bernice was, fortunately, alone. Bernice, gasped Marigold, Babe's coming to tell you something dreadful. I tried to stop her, but I couldn't. Bernice looked at Marigold with fear in her sad gray eyes. I knew she meant something this afternoon. She asked me where my father was buried, and I said in Charlottetown. Go and see if his grave's there, she'd said. What is it? Tell me. I'd rather hear it from you than her. Oh, I can't, Bernice. I can't, cried Marigold in agony. I thought I could, but I can't. You must, said Bernice. In the end, Marigold told her, haltingly, tearfully, then buried her face in her hands. I'm so happy, said Bernice. Marigold pulled her away. Bernice was radiant, eyes like stars. Happy? Yes. Oh, don't you see? I've got somebody after all. It was so dreadful to think I didn't belong to anybody. And Father'll need me so much when he comes out next year. There'll be so much I can do for him. Oh, Marigold, I do believe in God now. I'm sorry I ever said I didn't. Of course there's a God. And I love him. And I love everybody in the world. I don't mind a bit how poor and ugly I am now that I have a father to love. In Marigold's utter confusion of thought, only one idea stood out clearly. Oh, Bernice, if you do believe in God, Uncle Jarvis will let us play together again. Well, I do declare. Babe Kennedy stood in the doorway, a vicious, disappointed babe. So that was why you didn't want me to tell, so you could tell yourself. Exactly. Marigold put her arm around Bernice and faced Babe defiantly. And I have told it first, so you can just go home, Miss Meow. Nobody wants you here. End of chapter 19.
Chapter 20 of Magic for Marigold. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Magic for Marigold by Lucy Maud Montgomery. The Punishment of Billy. I have the evil eye, said Billy ominously. People are scared of me. If you're going to talk nonsense, we can't be friends, said Marigold coldly. If you're sensible, we can have some fun. Billy, nobody but Aunt Min ever called him William, looked at this sprite like Marigold and decided to be sensible. When Aunt Min had told him that Marigold Lesley was coming to Windyside for a week, Billy had two reactions. Firstly, he was mad. He didn't want a girl poking and snooping round. Secondly, he was rather pleased. It would be good fun to tease her and teach her her place. Now came a third. Marigold, sleek of hair, blue of eye, light of foot, found favour in his eyes. As signing seal that evening, sitting on the granary steps, he told her all his troubles. Marigold listened and sympathised with one side of her mind, and with the other carried on her own small thought processes, as in the way of womankind of all ages, whether men know it or not. Marigold could not quite understand why Billy detested staying at Aunt Min's so bitterly. For herself, she rather liked it. Billy thought Aunt Min too strict to live, but in Marigold's eyes, her regimen compares very favourably with grandmother's, though Marigold called her Aunt Min, according to the custom of the caste. She was really only a cousin of the cloud of spruce Leslies, but she was a genuine aunt of Billy's. That is to say, she had once been married to a half-brother of his father's, so Marigold and Billy might call themselves cousins of a sort. This was Marigold's first visit to Aunt Min, and was to be the final one of the autumn. Next week she must go to school again. Marigold liked Windyside. She liked the big, airy house with its room full of quaint old furniture. There were so many beautiful things to look at, especially the scores of strange and exquisite Indian shells, brought home by Aunt Min's sailor husband, and the case of stuffed parrots in the hall, with the model of a full-rigged ship atop of it. To be sure, Aunt Min was very strict about her diet, which was why grandmother had been so willing to let her come, and her table was something of the leanest. Aunt Min's temper was a bit uncertain also. She could say sharp things on occasion and had been known to slam doors. But there was compensations. For one thing, Aunt Min always asked her casually how she took her tea. For another, cats, dozens of adorable animals basking on the windowsills, sunning themselves in the garden walks, and prowling about the barn. A batch of kittens was all in the day's work at Windyside. For once in her life, Marigold felt that she had all the cats she wanted. Now all the use Billy had for a cat was a target. Marigold thought Billy very funny to look at. He had a round moon face of pink and white, large china blue eyes, a shock of fine straight yellow hair, and a mouth so wide he seemed to be perpetually grinning. But she rather liked him. He was the first boy she had ever liked. Hip, no, she had never liked Hip. This was entirely different. She listened sympathetically to his tale of woe. She thought Billy had a case. Billy, it seemed, had not wanted to come to Aunt Min's at all. His mother was dead, and he and his father lived together at a boarding house, where life was tolerable because of Dad. But Dad had to go to South America on a prolonged business trip, and hence Billy's sojourn with Aunt Min. Rotten, I call it, he growled. I wanted to go to Aunt Nora's. She's a real aunt, Mama's own sister, not a half-aunt like Aunt Min. I tell you, Aunt Nora's great. Always cuts a pie in 6 pieces. Aunt Min, do you ever notice, always cuts it in 8. A fella can do as he likes at Aunt Nora's. You haven't got to sit up on your hind legs and act real pretty all the time there. She ain't one of your fussy old things. Aunt Min is pretty particular, agreed Marigold, thinking how lovely that little blue glimpse of the harbour was at the end of the awkward aisle. Particular? Say, I've got to wash my face every day, and brush my teeth more times than you could shake a stick at, and live on healthy foods. Say, you ought to taste Aunt Nora's raspberry buns. They sound good, agreed Marigold, who herself felt certain hankerings after Sloane's pantry. Just think how splendid it would have been there. I won't have to be respectful for 1 minute, only on Sundays, and then I could have stood it up for a change. I could go barefoot and slide down the pighouse roof and eat everything that come handy. Hot dogs, there's a hot dog stand just outside Aunt Nora's gate. Billy groaned. It was agonising to think of the delights one might enjoy at Aunt Nora's, and contrast them with the bitter reality at Aunt Min's. Why wouldn't your father let you go to Aunt Nora's? Asked Marigold. Search me. I think he had some fool notion Aunt Min would be offended. I was to Aunt Nora's last summer, and Aunt Min thought it was her term. Mind you, it isn't because she likes me. She's got some fool idea of doing her duty by Dad. And mind you, she thinks Aunt Nora's is an awful place because Aunt Nora's poor. She thinks I wouldn't be happy there. Happy? Billy groaned again. I've never had such a good time as I had at Aunt Nora's. Hey, I had to hunt her turkeys up every evening, roam everywhere I liked, and no questions asked so long as I turned up at bedtime with the turks. Here if I go out of the gate it's, William, where have you been? And William, did you scrape your boots? Why, the cats here have to wipe their feet before they go in. Now, Billy, that's exaggerating, said Marigold reluctantly. Well, 'tain't exaggerating to say I don't dast throw a single stone here, said Billy defiantly. It's aggravating, that's what it is. Millions of cats and not a chance to throw a stone at one of them. I did throw one first day I was here. Gave her old yellow Tom the thrill of his life, and she jawed at me for a week and made me read a chapter of the Bible every day. I'd rather she'd take it out on my hind. She thinks out so many different ways of punishing me, and I never know what to expect. And then, do you hear her? Telling Miss Kent what I looked like when I was a baby. She's always at it. Catch Aunt Nora telling a fellow like that, or kissing me good night. Aunt Min always did. Thinks it's her duty, I suppose. Billy thrust his hands in his pocket and scowled at the universe, but he was feeling better. Remained only one grievance to be discussed, the worst of all. I couldn't worry long if it wasn't for Sundays, he said. I hate Sundays here. Hate it worse than pissing. Why? 'Cause I have to write a synopsis. What's a synopsis? Why you go to church and when you come home you got to write out all you can remember of the sermon. And if you can't remember enough, oh boy, she'll say her children always done it. She'll make you do it too, next Sunday, I'll bet. Marigold reflected a bit. She didn't think she would mind. It might be interesting, a kind of game in fact, for one Sunday. But poor Billy had to do it every Sunday. Well, never mind, she said soothingly. Sunday's a long way off yet. Let's see how much fun we can have before that. Decidedly, thought Billy, here was a girl. Sunday might be far off, but Sunday came. After a week during which Billy forgot to hanker for Aunt Nora's. That was all very well, but Marigold was going home Tuesday. Billy would have been torn in pieces by wild horses before he would have confessed how he hated that thought. But here was Sunday afternoon in church, to which Billy and Marigold must go alone because Aunt Min had been summoned to Charlottetown to see an old friend who was passing through and could be seen on no other day. I'm sorry I can't go to church, she said, because young Mr. Harvey Nelson is preaching for a call, and I'd like to hear him, but it can't be helped. I've left your suppers in the pantry for you. Now be good children. Marigold, you'll see that Billy behaves properly, won't you? Don't forget to pay close attention to the sermon. You must both write out a synopsis of it this evening, and I want to see a better result than last Sunday, Billy. Aha, gloated Billy as Aunt Min went out. I told you you'd have to do it too. Marigold did not resent his gloating. He was really behaving very well considering she had been told to look after his behaviour. That was too awful of Aunt Min. Why couldn't people understand certain perfectly plain, self-evident things? Oh my, ain't we Sundayfied, chanted Davy Dixon on the fence, as they went down the lane. Davy was freckled and snub-nosed, bareheaded and barefooted, with no more clothes on than decency required, but he did look so jolly and carefree. All the Dixons did. But they were a family Aunt Min detested. She never let Billy and Marigold play with them, though they lived only a cat's walk away through the bush behind Aunt Min's. Coming to the picnic? Asked Davy. What picnic? Oh, just the Dixon family picnic, grinned Davy. This is Mum and Pop's wedding day. 12 years married and ain't sorry for it yet. We're going to take our new car and go to the sandhills. Got a basket of eats made your eyes stick out. Yum yum, and Mum said to ask yous to come along too, 'cause she knew your Aunt Min was going away and you'd be lonesome. Marigold found herself wishing they could go. At home she liked going to church, but she wasn't sure she would like going to Windyside Church. She didn't like the look of it, a big, bare, wind-beaten, drab-tinted church, with a spire as long and sharp as a needle. Somehow it was not a friendly church, and she knew nobody there. A drive in a motor car to the sandhill sounded very alluring, but of course it was unthinkable. What was Billy saying? I'll go if you lend me that book at your place, the Flying Roll. Billy, said Marigold. Oh, all right, said Dave. It belongs to Aunt Janie, but she won't care. I'll go, said Billy decidedly. Come in, Marigold. Oh, please, remember what day this is, implored Marigold, with a wild wish in the back of her mind that she could go. And what will Aunt Min say? Aunt Min isn't going to know a thing about it. I've got a plan. Oh, come on, we'll have a rip-roaring time. Billy, you don't mean it. You bet I do. You can go to church if you want to, and stick all the afternoon to varnish your seats. Gotta make up your mind quick, said Dave. Lizzie's waiting. Marigold reflected rapidly. She couldn't go alone to a strange church, and it would be lonesome to stay home. The sand dunes, the wave, the winds on the sea. I'll go, she said helplessly. I knew you'd some gizzarding, you girl, gloated Bill. Let's scoot back and take off our proud rags. Just a minute, Dave. A few minutes later they were running along the path through a scented field of hay, on a shortcut to the Dixons. Ordinarily, Marigold felt she had wings on a day like this. Now she suddenly felt leaden-footed, but Billy must not suspect it. He would despise her if he found out she really did not care for all this lawlessness. The Dixons' new car proved to be very second-hand, snub-nosed little Ford, into which they all piled and rattled and bounced down a narrow, deep-rutted lane, to the sand dunes. Marigold sat on the knee of Mrs. Dixon, a big, pink, overblown lady, who used what even Billy knew to be bad grammar, in a cheerful, excruciating voice. Marigold thought the bones would be shaken out of her before they got to the dunes. It should have been a wonderful afternoon. Polly Dixon was a pretty, gentle little girl, and Marigold liked her. They slid down the sandhills and made shore pies and dug wells in the sand. They gathered clamshells and went bathing in a little sand cover-up, the shore where the water was like soft, warm, liquid turquoise. They played games with the boys. They laughed and ran and scampered, and under it all, Marigold knew perfectly well that she was not having a good time. She was only trying to make herself think she was. Even the lunch, to which she looked forward a little shamedly after a week of Aunt Min's diet, was a disappointment. There was plenty of it, but Mrs. Dixon was not a good cook. Marigold ate stale sandwiches and cookies that reeked of soda, and a piece of mushy lemon pie. She always believed that she also ate 2 crickets that got tangled up in the meringue of the pie, but Billy thought that feed was extra X. I wish to goodness I could eat some more, but I can't, he sighed, bolting the last morsel of a gorgeous piece of cake, whose eye surface was decorated with violent red and yellow candies. Wasn't it jolly, said Billy, drawing a long, unregretful breath, as they walked home together through the hayfield. Won't it be jolly when Aunt Min asks you to write a synopsis and you can't? Demanded Marigold, rather wearily and sarcastically. Billy grinned. I'll just write it. This Flying Roll book is full of sermons. I read some dandy ones in it one day down at Dixon's before you came. We'll just write a synopsis of one of them, and Aunt Min will never know the difference. We won't, cried Marigold. You can do as you like, but I won't cheat like that. Then you'll go and give the whole thing away, said Billy, pale with wrath and fear. No, I won't. I'll just tell Aunt Min I couldn't write a synopsis. She'll send you to bed, without any supper. I don't care, said Marigold pathetically, putting her hand on her stomach. That lemon pie was awful. Billy betook himself to a little room Aunt Min called her library. His opinion was that writing a synopsis with a printed sermon before you was a snap. When Aunt Min came home, he was ready for her. Marigold said, with a very good imitation of Grandmother Leslie's manner, that she could not write a synopsis. Aunt Min looked at her for a moment, but said nothing. She took Billy's copious sheets with a very grim smile, a smile that speedily changed to a frown. Surely Harvey Nelson never preached stuff such as this. Why, what's the matter with it? Cried Billy. Matter? It's hearsay, rank hearsay. Why, the man must be a Second Adventist. I never read such doctrines. Well, he'll not get any call to Windyside, if I can prevent it. I was in favour of him because he's engaged to Dovie Sinclair, and she is a distant relation of mine, but this preposterous sermon is too much. Aunt Min rustled indignantly out of the room, leaving Billy to reflect on the snares and pitfalls of existence. What do you suppose is wrong with it? He whispered miserably. I don't know, said Marigold agitatedly, but I do know that if Mr. Nelson is engaged to Dovie Sinclair, he's got to get that call. Dovie's my Sunday school teacher at home, and I won't have her disappointed through our fault. Don't you dare snitch on me, cried Billy. Let things alone. Maybe she'll call down, or find out from someone else he didn't preach it. Marigold's face was white and tragic. She never will. She'll just say he doesn't preach sound doctrine, and she won't explain anything about it. You know Aunt Min. She's got to be told, and I'm going to tell her. But you needn't come if you're scared. I'm scared, but I'm coming. You don't suppose I'm going to leave you to do it all alone, said Billy staunchly. Besides, it was all my doings. I made you go. If Aunt Min has to be told, she's got to be told that too. No wonder folks like Billy. Half an hour later, Billy and Marigold were sitting on the granary steps. Their fatal interview was over, and it had not been a pleasant one, to state it mildly. None the pleasanter for Marigold in that Aunt Min forgave her readily, because Billy had led her astray. Perhaps Aunt Min did not want to get it in wrong with the Cloud and Spruce people, but all the vials of her wrath were uncorked on Billy's devoted head. She told Billy he had disgraced his name and ordered him to go out and stay out until she had decided on his punishment. If it had not been for Billy, Marigold would have been feeling very happy. It was so delightful to be good friends with herself again, and if only one knew what was going to be done to Billy, it was such a perfect evening. Those little golden dells among the sunset hill, the path of moonrise glitter on the harbour over which a ship of dreams might come sailing, those gossiping poplars, the green creaminess of that field of buckwheat blossom in the shade of the wood, the pines behind the well like big green purring pussycats, the sweetest imp-faced kitten purring at her from under the milk bench. But what do you suppose she'll do? She whispered to Billy. The subject had such a gruesome fascination. "Oh, likely make me wear a girl's apron for a week," groaned Billy. "She made me wear one for 2 days the time I put peanut shells in Elder John's pocket in prayer meeting." Say, Billy began to laugh. That was fun. When he pulled out his hanky in the middle of prayer, the shells flew every which way for a Sunday. One struck the minister on the nose. Marigold saw the picture and laughed satisfyingly. Billy reflected gloomily that she was going home Tuesday. If only she was be around to help him through whatever Aunt Min would visit on him. To be sure, she had gotten him into the scrape, but he bore her no grudge for that. She was a good little scout. The moon had come up until she seemed to be resting on the very tip of the tall Lombardy on the hills when Aunt Min came across the yard, a rigid figure of outraged majesty. She looked scornfully at Billy and spoke in a sad, gentle way. When Aunt Min banged doors and locked or spoke sourly or sharply, no one worried. But when Aunt Min smiled in that curious, sweet fashion and spoke in that low, even tone, then beware. It was the calm before the levin bolt. "Do you realise that you've behaved very badly?" she asked. Gulped Billy. "I've decided." Aunt Min paused. Billy was speaking. What fiendish punishment had Aunt Min devised? Marigold slipped a little cold hand of backing into his. "I don't feel equal to the responsibility of looking after you any longer," resumed Aunt Min, more gently than ever. "So I've decided to send you to your Aunt Nora's tomorrow." End of chapter 20. Read by Jess.
Chapter 21 of Magic for Marigold. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Margsayit. Magic for Marigold by Lucy Maud Montgomery. Her Chrism of Womanhood. A new magic had fallen over Cloud of Spruce. Grandmother solemnly decreed that Marigold might play with Sydney Guest. Grandmother would not, of course, call him Budge as everybody else did. His mother was a Randolph from Charlottetown, so that he was a quite permissible playmate for a Lesley of Harmony. Mr. Guest had bought Mr. Duncan's farm, and so Budge lived right next door to Cloud of Spruce. He was a nice-mannered little boy, so grandmother said, rather thin and scrawny as to looks, with sandy hair but fine, clear gray eyes. The only thing grandmother was seriously afraid of was that they might poison themselves in some of their prowls and rambles. Not an ill-founded fear at all, for in spite of all warnings, they ate or tried to eat nearly everything they came across. Marigold had never had a real playmate in Harmony before, save for Gwen's hectic 3 weeks. She did not seem to care for any of the girls in Harmony, and though she wrote fat gossipy letters to Gwen and Paula and Bernice, she did not see them very often. Perhaps Sylvia spoiled her for other little girls, as Mother sometimes thought rather anxiously. Mother had always defended Sylvia sympathizingly against a grandmother who did not understand some things. But sometimes lately she wondered if she had been wise in so doing. It would not be a good thing if the wild, secret charm of fairy playmates spoiled Marigold for the necessary and valuable companionship of her kind. Marigold was 12. Her golden hair was deepening to warm brown, and she had at last learned not to pronounce interesting. Surely it was time she was outgrowing Sylvia. So Lorraine Lesley was glad when, just at the beginning of vacation, the guests bought the Duncan place, and Marigold and Budge took a prompt liking to each other. Marigold was amazed to find herself really liking a boy. She had never liked any of the boys in school. She had liked Billy, but she had forgotten him. She had detested Cousin Marcus Jack. As for Hip Price, he had made her hate all boys for a time. But Budge was different from any boy she had ever known. For weeks, Marigold's existence became one of hair-raising excitement. She did things to win Budge's approval that she had never dreamed of doing. They went trouting up the brook, and Marigold was such a sport in regard to worms that Budge thought in his heart, but did not say, that she was almost as good as a boy. They waded under the bridge. They climbed to the ventilator on top of the big guest barn. They played pirate on an old green boat, the Daisy Dean, stranded on the harbor shore, with a black flag made out of ShrimpPhish's old black silk shirt, and decorated with a skull and crossbones. In it they sailed on amazing voyages, hunting for gold and glamour and adventure. They had a password and a secret sign. They fixed up a stove of stones and cooked mussels and potatoes over it. With Budge, Marigold could explore all the pretty playlands down the harbor where she would never have dared to go alone. They even went as far as that gray, misty end of the world known as the harbor's mouth, where the silver and lilac sand dunes stretched in all their wild, sweet loveliness of salt-withered grasses and piping sea winds. Nobody ever knew that, or that they had got caught by the tide and had to climb the banks and come home through dripping wet meadows. 'Twas a guilty, triumphant secret. And another was the driftwood fire they made on shore one twilight. They had been told never to play with fire, but that did not spoil their enjoyment of it one bit. Rather heightened it, I am afraid. This secret, forbidden thing had a charm all its own, and some days they fairly lived in the froggy marsh, where a very decent dragon also had his abode, and grizzly bears grizzled. Marigold had a deadly horror of frogs, but she never let Budge know it, and she compelled herself to carry a dead snake on a stick to win his admiration. She also brought herself to say, "Holy cats," but try as she would, she could never compass a darn, which was just as well, because in his heart Budge did not care for girls who said darn. She was never able to learn to whistle on a blade of grass as he did, but she could do one thing he couldn't do, make the dearest pudding bags out of the fat live-forever leaves. Budge tried, but his thumb pressure was always too heavy, so the balance of respect was kept true. And when Budge sat down on a hot oven door one day, in trousers that needed a patch, Marigold never even asked him how his burns were getting on. By such tact is friendship preserved. Budge patted Marigold's kitten, Pops, and Marigold loved his dog, Dix. But Sylvia she could not yet share with him. Budge had somehow got the idea that Marigold had some pet mystery connected with the Hill of Spruce, and yet sometimes teased her to tell him what it was. But Marigold always refused. Not yet. Not yet. She had never, in spite of fleeting temptation, told any of her playmates about Sylvia, not even Bernice. Sylvia was so much her own, although Marigold owned it to herself occasionally with a sorrowful sigh. Somehow, Sylvia just wasn't the same. Not so vivid, so living, so real. The change had come about so slowly that Marigold did not yet realize how far her jolly chumship with Budge had replaced that goblin comradeship of her lonely years. She clung to Sylvia, remembering what Aunt Marigold had said to her one evening as they sat in the orchard. "Keep your dream, little Marigold, as long as you can. A dream is an immortal thing. Time cannot kill it or age wither it. You may tire of reality, but never of dreams." "It hurts to wake up, though," said Marigold timidly. "When I come back through the green gate, I always feel that it's just terrible to think there really isn't any Sylvia, that she's just something I've dreamed." "The dreamer's joy is worth the dreamer's pain," said Aunt Marigold, knowing that since Marigold had begun to think of Sylvia as a dream, that the sad awakening was near. So almost every day, some time of it, Marigold slipped through the magic door in the green gate and summoned Sylvia. Sylvia always came, still. But there was a difference. Marigold would have told Budge about Sylvia if she could have been sure how he would take her. Marigold knew of a side of his nature which made her think he might understand Sylvia. Rarely, Budge gave her glimpses of this side. When they grew tired of prowling and pirating and sat on the wharf, watching the ghostly sails of outgoing ships in the twilight, Budge would recite to her shyly the queer little verses of poetry he sometimes made up. Marigold thought they were wonderful. Budge understood, too, the secret thrill that came when you opened a new book, and he was a crackerjack at yarns. She liked his Scarlet Boy stories better than her rose-pink and moon-blue girl fancies. That one of the wolf-skin rug on the guest parlor floor, coming alive and prowling at night with burning eyes. Marigold couldn't sleep when she went to bed for the delicious horror of it. Was it coming across the road now, snuffing through the garden, padding up the stairs? Marigold screamed aloud, and Mother came in and said she had a nightmare. And then the Austins bought the old Burnaby place and moved in. Tad Austin was a boy of Budge's age, and Marigold found herself deserted. 'Tis an old tale and often told. Tad Austin's parents, for some inscrutable reason, had seen fit to christen him Romney, but he never got anything but Tad. He was really not a bad-looking boy, with a chubby, agreeable brown face, although Marigold, who naturally could see nothing attractive about him, thought that his round, prominent blue eyes looked absurdly like the flat blue plums on the tree by the apple barn. The world was suddenly a cold, lonely, empty place for our poor Marigold. Always hitherto she had taken her troubles to her mother. But she couldn't take this. She couldn't. Not even her mother could understand. Certainly grandmother couldn't. Grandmother, who passing Marigold sitting disconsolately on the twilight steps, had remarked humorously, "Don't sigh, but send. And if he doesn't come, let him be hanged." Send indeed. Marigold would have died the death before she would have made the slightest effort to get Budge back. The cats could have him. She got an enormous satisfaction out of picturing to herself how haughty and implacable she would be if he did come back. At least this was how she felt about it at first. "Perhaps he'll be sorry when I'm dead," thought Marigold darkly. But she would show Budge, show everybody. She didn't care. She went and made candy and sang like a lark, but there was nobody to share the candy with when it was made. She gave Lazar the most of it to take to his children. Life was a howling wilderness for Marigold the next few weeks. It seemed to her that Budge and Tad literally flaunted their intimacy and fun in her face, though the shameful truth was that they never thought about her at all. They got up a show, and all the boys of Harmony could see it for a cent, but no girls. Oh, it was mean. Budge and Tad went fishing up the brooks. Budge and Tad dug for pirate gold. Budge and Tad had smugglers' rendezvous in the cave Marigold had discovered on the harbor shore. Budge and Tad had the kitten hunt in the guest barn which Marigold and Budge had planned to have in the fullness of time when there should be kittens to hunt. This was the last straw that broke Marigold's pride. She would so have loved a kitten hunt with Budge in the great dusky hay-scented old barn. She must get Budge back. She must. Existence was quite impossible without him. But how? What could she do? Marigold knew she must not show her hand too plainly. Instinct told her that. Besides, she had a dim old memory of something old grandmother had said long, long ago. If you run after a man, he'll run away. It's instinct. We have to run when anything chases us. Wherefore she, Marigold, would not run after Budge. Was there any other way? I wonder if it would do any good to pray about it, she thought. Then she decided she couldn't try it anyway. I don't want him to come back because God made him come. I want him to come back because he wants to. Like an inspiration came the thought of Sylvia. She would tell him about Sylvia. He had always wanted to know about Sylvia. He might come back then. It was a fortunate coincidence that Salome asked her to go over to the guest place on an errand that very afternoon. Budge was sitting on the side doorsteps, packing fish worms in a tin can. He grinned at her cheerfully and absently. It had never occurred to Budge that he had treated Marigold shamelessly. She had simply, for the time, ceased to count. I have something to tell you, whispered Marigold. What is it? Said Budge indifferently. Marigold sat down beside him and told him all about Sylvia at last, about the magic door and the green gate and the land of butterflies and the rhyme. She had a curious, unpleasant sense of loss and disloyalty as she told it, as if she were losing something that was very precious. And she had her reward. "Aw, that sounds awful silly," said Budge. Marigold went away without another word. She would never speak to Budge Guest again. She would never have anything to do with any boy again. All tarred with the same brush, as Lazar said. She would go back to Sylvia, darling, neglected Sylvia. Through the magic door, up the slope of fern, through the green gate, then the rhyme. And no Sylvia. Marigold stared helplessly around her with a quivering lip. No Sylvia. Sylvia would not come, would never come again. Marigold felt this as we feel certain things irrevocably. Was it because she had told Budge about her? Or was it because she had suddenly grown too old and wise for fairyland? Were the ivory gates and golden, of which Mother something sang, closed behind her forever? Marigold flung herself down among the ferns in the bitterest tears she had ever shed, ever would shed, perhaps. Her lovely dream was gone. Who of us is there who has not lost one? It was the next day Budge came back, an indignant Budge, avid to pour out his wrongs to somebody, and that somebody was the disdained and disdainful Marigold, who had vowed afresh the night before that if Budge Guest ever spoke to her again, she would treat him with such scorn and contempt that even his thick hide would feel it. Budge and Tad had fought because their dogs had fought. My dog won, gulped Budge, and Tad got mad. He said Dix was only a mongrel cur. He's jealous, said Marigold comfortingly, and he has an awful temper. I heard that long ago from a girl who knew him well. I dared him to fight me, then, and he said he wouldn't fight me because I was such a sissy. He wouldn't fight you because he knew he'd get licked even worse than his dog did, said Marigold, oh so scornfully. But the scorn was all for Tad. He wouldn't fight, but he kept on saying mean things. He said I wore a nightcap. Well, I did once, years ago, when I was little, but everybody wears nightcaps when they're little, said Marigold. And he said that I was a coward, and that I wouldn't walk through the graveyard at night. Let's go through it tonight and show him, said Marigold eagerly. Not tonight, said Budge hastily. There's a heavy dew, you'd get wet. Happiness flowed through Marigold like a wave. Budge was thinking of her welfare. At least so she believed. He said his grandfather had whiskers and mine hadn't. Should a grandfather have whiskers? It's ever so much more aristocratic not to have them, said Marigold with finality. And he said I wasn't tattooed and couldn't stand tattooing. He's always been so conceited about that snake his sailor uncle tattooed on his arm. What if he is tattooed? Marigold wanted to know. She recalled what grandmother had said about that tattooed snake. It's barbaric disfigurement. Didn't you say anything to him? Budge gulped. Everything I said, he said it over again and laughed. There's something so insulting about that, agreed Marigold. And he called me a devilish pup. I wouldn't mind being called a devilish pup, said Marigold, who thought it sounded quite dashing and romantic. But there was something yet worse to be told. He said I was unladylike. This was a bit of a poser for Marigold. It would never do to imply that Budge was ladylike. Why didn't you tell him that he's pop-eyed and that he eats like a rhinoceros? She inquired calmly. Budge was at the end of his list of grievances. His anger was ebbing, and he had a horrible feeling that he was going to cry. And back of that, a delicious feeling that even if he did, Marigold would understand and not despise him. What a brick of a girl she was, worth 1,000,000 Tad Austins. As a matter of fact, Budge got off without crying, but he never forgot that feeling. I'm never going to have anything to do with him again, he said darkly. Say, do you want one of them gray kittens? If you do, I'll bring it over tomorrow. Oh, do, said Marigold. The witches are all black this summer. They sat there for an hour eating nut-sweet apples, entirely satisfied with themselves. To Marigold, the tiny roses on the bush by the steps seemed like the note or echoes of the little song that was singing itself in her heart. All that had once made magic made it again. And she asked Budge if he had told Tad about Sylvia. Of course not. That's your secret, said Budge grandly. And he doesn't know about the password and the secret sign either. That's our secret. When Budge went home, it was agreed that he should bring the kitten the next afternoon and that they should go on a quest for the Holy Grail up among the spruces. I'll never forget tonight, said Marigold. Some lost ecstasy had returned to life, but the next morning it seemed as if the night before had never been. When Marigold had sprung eagerly out of her blue and white bed, slipped into her clothes, and run liltingly down to the front door, what did she see? Budge and Tad walking amiably down the road with fishing poles and worm cans, while 2 dogs trotted behind in entire amity. Marigold stood rigid. She made no response when Budge waved his pole gaily at her and shouted hello. Her heart, so full of joy a moment ago, was lead, heavy and cold. That was a doleful forenoon. Her new dress of peach silk came home, but Marigold was not interested in it. A maiden forsaken and grieved in spirit has no vanity. But just let Budge Guest come to her again for comfort. Budge came that afternoon, but not in search of comfort. He was cheerful and grinful, and he brought an adorable clover-scented kitten with a new pattern of stripes. But Marigold was cold and distant. Very. What's biting you? Said Budge. Nothing, said Marigold. Look here, expostulated Budge. I came over to go grailing with you, but if you don't want to go, just say so. Tad wants me to go to the harbor mouth. For a moment, pride and something else struggled fiercely together in Marigold's heart. Something else won. Of course I want to go grail hunting, she said. They did not find the grail, but they found one of grandmother's precious pink luster cups, which had been lost for 2 years, ever since a certain Lesley reunion picnic had been held on the Spruce Hill, found it safe and unharmed in a crevice of the stone dike, and grandmother was so pleased that she gave them a whole plateful of hop-and-go fetchits to eat, which was symbolic. She would not have given them hop-and-go fetchits if it had really been the Grail they found. Budge went home. He had a tryst with Tad for the evening. Marigold sat down on the veranda steps. The little streak of yellow sky above the dark hills over the harbor was very lonely. The sound of breakers tumbling on the far-away outer shore was very lonely. She was very lonely, in spite of her jolly afternoon with Budge. Aunt Marigold, coming out, noted Marigold's face and sat down beside her. Aunt Marigold, who had never had any children of her own, knew more mothercraft than many women who had. She had not only the seeing eye, but the understanding heart as well. In a short time, she had the whole story. If she smiled over it, Marigold did not see it. You must not expect to have Budge wholly to yourself, dear, as you had Sylvia. Our earthly house of love has many mansions and many tenants. Budge will always be coming back to you. He finds something in your companionship Tad can't give him. He'll come for it, never fear. But you must share him with others. We, women, must always share. Marigold sat a while longer after Aunt Marigold had gone away, but she was no longer unhappy. A dreamy smile lingered on her lips. The new kitten purred on her lap. The twilight wrapped her round. Robber winds came down out of the cloud of spruce to rifle spices from the flower beds in the orchard. There was gold of her namesake flowers all along the dusk of the walk. The stars twinkled through the fir trees, and right and left the harbor range lights shone like great earth stars. Presently a moon rose, and there was a sparkling trail over the harbor like a lady's silken dress. Yes, she must share Budge. The old magic was gone forever, gone with Sylvia and the hidden land and all the dear, sweet, fading dreams of childhood. But after all, there were compensations. For one thing, she could be as big of a coward as she wanted to be. No more hunting snakes and chiving frogs. No more pretending to like horrible things that squirmed. She was no longer a boy's rival. She stood on her own ground. And I'll always be here for him to come back to, she thought. End of chapter 21. End of Magic for Marigold by Lucy Maud Montgomery.